Hello and welcome to the Hurling Show here on Our Game. Myself, Shane, Stapleton, Michael Verney as ever with me. How are you doing, Michael?
How's it going, Shane? I have the Jerry McInerney tash, the jersey, the hair, the white boots on underneath here. You can't see them.
As far as I hear, you're a bit like Luke Ming Flanagan. You're not wearing any breeches at all underneath there.
What people can't see can't hurt them.
Yeah, it is true. Yeah, we're wearing the OrgaRetro.com jerseys here. This is a real throwback here to the glory days of Limerick in the 90s and so on. If you want to get 15% off it, use the promo code OurGame. Same with that Galway one there. Do you know what? I don't think the bile between Tipperary and Limerick, and I mean, I'm an hour away from the border anyway, I don't think it's at such a stage yet that I would, be too queasy about wearing it.
No, whatever about wearing a modern day jersey, an olden time one like that. Like I just love it. I just love the fact that Shaw's were like almost nationwide. It's just it's so ridiculous that it almost caught on. Like,
but it's like Carlsberg, probably the best lager in the world.
Yeah, well, I can't say it definitely is the best lager in the world, but I might have to say I'm a big fan of that. Immediately, funnily enough, Dave Clark is the one that springs to mind when I see that jersey. Not Kieran Carey or Gary Kirby. I don't know why. It's just Dave Clark with the blonde hair, and that great picture came out recently of the generational difference between generations and halfbacks with him and Kyle Hayes, and probably about a foot in the difference of the two of them. But yeah, that's an absolute beauty now, I have to say.
Hey, we had someone saying there the other day, if you wore Tipperary gear, they'd sign up to the Patreon.com, the monthly thing. And what are you trying to do here?
I tell you what, I haven't worn a Tipperary jersey. I don't have one to wear.
I'll get you the vintage one there.
Depends now, is it just one person signing up for Patreon? Is he signing up for Patreon for life? Do you know what I mean?
It would have to be a lifetime deal.
The stakes are going to have to be increased here, I think, for something like that to happen.
Yeah, comments are flying in already. We'll come to those in just a second. But just a reminder, if you do want to sign up to the Patreon and would appreciate the support, patreon.com/OurGame, $5 a month there. All the audio podcasts. And I see comments in over the weekend saying how handy it is to have the audio podcast if you're going for a run, so you don't have to have the YouTube video opened up. Also, please do subscribe to the channel. Absolutely free to do it. Just hit the button in the bottom right corner on YouTube and subscribe to all the other social channels. Again, absolutely free, so it really does help the channel, and I'd love to get over 10,000 as soon as possible. Michael, we can't but talk about the scenes that we saw from Wicklow over the weekend. We'll go into the details in a second, but just to play some of the video here. Joe, what, I had the video before kind of, started to fly around online, and I was like, should I put this up or not? And I kind of didn't for a finish, until after everyone else had done it. But we'll just play it here, and we'll play at least some of it here.
Get off him, you bastard! Get off them. Someone call the cops! Lads, get off! Get off! Lads, get off! Guys! Off! Get them off! This is disgusting behaviour! Get off him!
Joe, some of the language in there is a little bit tasty, so we won't keep it going there. But that was the under-15 final between Carnew and Kilcool, under-15D final, and it was played at Wicklow's GA Centre of Excellence in Ballynakill. And I think it was at the end of the game, a Carnew player was sent off after the final whistle, and the players and the mentors were shaking hands. And, Kilcool had won 3-8 to 9 points, and then it just all kicked off. I mean, we saw what happened in Laois there not so long ago, when there was people coming in from the sideline and leaning in over the hoarding, and there was punches being thrown in all directions. And it's nasty enough. Now, 99.9% of games pass off without this sort of stuff happening, but that's twice in the space of a few weeks. So it's more tasteless is probably the very minimum you'd call that.
This was very bad now, and I'm delighted to see that it attracted the attention that it deserved to attract. For with due respect, this isn't a senior county final or something where everything is on the line. It's an underage match. First and foremost, you'd love to win underage games and underage finals, but first and foremost, it's to get lads and lasses playing the games and to keep them playing. Like, you saw, like one of the most kind of startling aspects of it was, some of the players running around just like almost like not knowing what was going on and trying to run away from the whole thing, and some of them running into the dressing room. You'd imagine how kind of how listless they would be after all this, how disillusioned they could be with the GA after something like this. If their parents were involved, like, would you want to be staying playing and encouraging your parents to come to games and potentially for stuff like this to happen again? It's just really, really bad. And I said a couple of weeks ago after the Laois one, like, we were long enough without spectators at anything, but you really would have to question, spectators being let back to some games when you see these type of things happening. And now, to be fair, Wicklow has a bad record for this type of thing happening. And in fairness to Laois, historically, Laois wouldn't have a great record for things like that happening as well. And like, we were playing championship on Saturday and in Coolderry, and it was very, very tight. And you only have a certain amount of people let on the pitch. And you're almost like, why can't we have more hurley carriers, or why can't we have more whatever? And then you see things like this happening, and it's just like, you can understand why they would limit it to 2 on the sideline or 3 on the sideline to try and stop things like this happening. Obviously, after a match, people will be coming out into the pitch. There's no real presentation area in Ballinkill. The presentation will be made on the pitch or whatever. Like, when people start congregating then on the pitch, you just don't expect things like this to happen. And I'd imagine, I haven't heard anything. I was only thinking about it when this happened. I haven't heard anything about sanctions in Laois since that incident. And I'd say Wicklow will be all quiet for a while. But like, they have to come down seriously hard on particularly the instigators of this thing. And it's just awful to look at. And it's an awful representation of our organisation as well.
Yeah, look, I can see there's comments coming in from people suggesting that a couple of things that happened and who struck who and stuff like that. And just going to play it safe and not bring some of those comments up on screen, because just without knowing the full ins and outs, you're just going to err on the side of caution a little bit. But like, the game was over and this all kicked off. So you'd imagine there had to be a little bit of sledging going on in one direction or the other, either because we won and we're sowing it into you, or else allegations from the other side, you didn't deserve it, or whatever might happen. Obviously, this is complete speculation. I don't know. But an under-15 game, for this to happen, I mean, our club rivalry is that strong that you go out to an under-15 game and somehow allow it to all kick off when a game is over. I mean, what sort of headspace do you have to be in if you're a person who instigated this? And like, it's one thing like players who were involved in a game kicking off with each other, and that's unsavory enough. But like, let's say it was 2 under-15 players who were kicking off with each other, or 2 adults kicking off with each other after a game. I mean, for adults to be getting involved, it's just, it's beyond ridiculous.
I can totally understand players going at each other, because you've been in matches where like anything can happen. You could you say things on the pitch totally in the heat of the moment that you would never say off the pitch, and that's just the nature of it. And but generally 99.9% of the time you'll shake hands with whoever that was at the end of the game. That's the way it is. But for that to like carry over after a match, and for it to be mentors, be it mentors or be it parents or whoever it was, like, they just don't really have any part in that. I saw somebody saying, that parents who have children involved in a team shouldn't be let get involved, which that's just ridiculous, because you might never have anybody over teams if parents were denied that. Like, you follow your kids up a lot of the time, and that's how you get people involved in clubs. But Wicklow are definitely going to have to come down really hard here with real sanctions that will make a point, and will make a point, I'd say, for a long, long time.
Yeah, I see Flash saying here, someone mentioned parents shouldn't be coaching these underage teams. Understand there probably isn't that many people willing to do underage coaching, but still should be finding more neutral coaches. It's just not possible. It's just not possible. Like, you're hoping and praying that someone will take these sort of teams. I mean, we've all heard about, like, maybe even at adult level as well, but juvenile meetings where you're almost crying out to see, will someone take this team for next year? And it is more than likely a parent. How many times have you heard someone say, I'm not really too interested in coaching now, maybe if I have a young boy or a young girl down the line, I might get involved in coaching their team? So it's just going to always be a reality of it. And a good comment here from Joe 18 Ken, there's no fences at the pitches and people will stand on the sidelines at the games. Obviously that's not going to help things either.
No, it's a difficult one. There's a couple of things a rot can kind of set in here. I've seen, like, an Offaly senior hurling championship matches where there's been no linesman assigned for the games, and then all of a sudden, a clubman from Burr ends up one side and a clubman from Drumcullen ends up the other side.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, but for championship games, that's not right. They're totally in the line of fire. That's standards dropping within a county, and that's leaving yourself open for things to happen, because it's going to be harder unless they're the most unbiased person in the world. If it's a 50-50 call, they're probably going to wave it in their own direction. So, and as well as that, like, referees have to ensure that somehow there's an area cordoned off on the pitch, or somehow the people are behind a certain point. It's like a teacher in a classroom.
But Laois have theirs cordoned off. Yeah. And still players were,
Yeah, well, that's true. And that's an adult game. and not there's no there's no letting people away with it because it's adult and there's more on the line. But kids get like with a kids game, an under 15 D final. Let that sink in. The 4th division of under 15 within Wicklow, and something like this happens. So it has gained huge national traction. I think it was basically the splash story on our site yesterday from 1 o'clock onwards. I think probably till this morning. And I think I saw it early yesterday morning at 105,000 views on Twitter or something like that. Whoever put the original clip out, and it's just a really bad look for the GAA, and Wicklow are going to have to come down really, really hard on. It's going to be hard to identify the people involved, maybe to some extent. How many people, do you sanction everyone that was involved? It's going to be really interesting to see how hard a line they toe with it.
This is the thing, unless you have conclusive proof, it's very hard, and then you go down the road of appeals and stuff like that, and you're just creating more hassle for yourself again. I'm going to just... It seems a bit of a tasteless jump onto to another topic, but you and I were talking about Fury and Wilder just beforehand. I don't know if people saw this fight over the weekend.
This is legalized boxing now.
Legalized boxing, yeah. And we were kind of thinking, who would have been like the hard man of the GAA that you wouldn't want to climb into the ring with? I don't know if you've ever been in a boxing ring, but I think it was about 4 years ago with Kula under Matty Kenny. We went out to Packy Collins, and we did a few sessions out there in the gym. I think it's a Celtic something gym. I can't remember whatever it was. It was somewhere up, not too far from Castleknock, if I remember correctly. And we did a session, and it's heavy going. Like, it really is heavy going. And we were put in the ring with other lads, and we were wearing those massive sort of body armor things at the front. They're absolutely colossal sort of things. And you're put in there, and you're just wailing on a lad like for 30 seconds. And he just has to try and block you, and you have to just kind of mill him as much as you can. I think I was doing with Nicky Kenny, and at one stage I was getting tick at him, sort of backing off from my shots, because you're supposed to just absorb the shots, and I started hitting him across the head, and he was going nuts at me, and we're there screaming at each other in the middle of the ring. And you know how you get carried away when you're doing this sort of stuff, but it was all well and good. We were only kind of messing. But when it comes back to it, who are the hard men of the GAA in the history who you just wouldn't want to be on the wrong end of a punch from? And by the way, Fury, what a fighter. He's unbelievable. Whatever you think about him in terms of what he says away from the ring, my God, he's some fighter.
Yeah, we'll go into it a bit later, but for 19 and a half stone and to be able to move around like he does and duck and dive is unbelievable. So a couple of people would have stood out for me. With the nickname he has, like Dermot O'Sullivan is made for it, really. Like, introduced as, Dermot, the Rock, and he'd come out to You Can't Stop the Rock or something like that. Like, it's all laid out for him already, and he's maybe carrying a boulder to the ring or something like that. It's all like Frank Warren. It's made for you. Just go and get it done. Someone like him would be ideal. We all remember the time he caught the ball, lost his hurling, came out with that big shoulder. I think he drove DJ back, and he drove someone else back as well. He would definitely be like a heavyweight. Maybe someone like Paul Shelley as well is someone who jumps back to mind too. Johnny Matter from Loughrea would be another one.
He's mentioned here by Boom Boom 43. Colin Lynch also mentioned.
Yeah, no weapons allowed, obviously, but he would definitely be able to pack a fair punch as well. They'd definitely be three that would jump out. The late great Paddy O'Shea, of course, famously threw an absolute whaler of a box in a Munster final against Cork one time, and then went over and apologised straight away. I'm not too sure if you would be doing that in a boxing ring anyway. The ref would have him back over in the corner, but they definitely, some lads that kind of stood out to me anyway.
Mick Lyons would be hardy enough, I'd say.
Yeah, very, very funny, Shane. I was in Ger Lyons' stables in Meath last Wednesday, and who was there? Only Mick Lyons, and he was there for about 15 minutes, and he never said he was Mick Lyons or anything like that. And he's one of these classic cases of a real quiet fella off the pitch. You could be chatting him for 2 days, I'd say, and he wouldn't tell you who he was. But I was looking at him, I was like, just that's Mick Lyons, a real gentle giant. And again, the same, the more than stepping between the white lines, stepping between the ropes, I'd say he'd be a killer if he stepped between the ropes.
Was he not wearing like a green jersey with number 3 on the back of it? No,
not this time. No Orga Retro jersey with 3 on the back.
Well, what about some of the other Meath lads? Sure, Liam Harnan would have been a bashed. Colm Coyle would have been a hardy lad. Brian Lohan would be a fairly uncompromising figure on the field. let's see, who else?
There's one that stands out to me. You know the episode of The Simpsons where Homer goes into the boxing game and he can just take all the punishment you like, and then he just kind of blows the lad over at the end. Someone like Francie Bellew, I'd say, would just take everything you would throw at him and he'd just stay coming back for more. I'd say there's no give in someone like him.
Kieran McGeeney, of course, his MMA kind of experience at this stage would stand him. Who else?
Johnny McGee wasn't Johnny McGee going to have a fight with Quinton Hahn at one stage, the snooker player.
He did have the fight with him.
Did he have the fight after?
He did have the fight. I actually did an interview with Johnny McGee about that. You can find that on the playlist. And surely there's someone from that Tyrone team of the Naughties. I mean, obviously you'd have Ricey in there in the lightweight bouts, but who would you have in the heavyweight bouts in there? There's a few awful pigs in that team who you wouldn't want to get stuck in a dark room with. Sure, Gormley would do a bit of damage. I mean, this all in the positive sort of way.
Yeah, Hub Hughes would be another one. I think. I definitely would take. And then, like, it's easy to look at the big guys. Like, I can imagine Joe Dean as a little flyweight that'd pick off jabs and be real elusive and that kind of as well. But you always kind of come back to thinking of the big guys, I suppose.
Look at who's mentioned here, Dick O'Hara. We all know that uncompromising picture of him. Iron Mike Houlihan, Big Fergal Doc from Derry. Yeah, two very good ones there. Mick Lyons. Remember Banville from Wexford, and Fanning tried to rough him up. Yeah, that was Stephen Banville. And I think Fanning's ear got lacerated because the helmet was pulled across it, and then he wore a sort of a cup over the ear hole the next day. Do you remember that? That's
right, yeah. It was a big, I think it was a white kind of a cup over it, yeah, but he wasn't going to have the same thing happen again anyway. There was talks that the Rock O'Sullivan used to flick off the straps of Martin Comerford's helmet as well, and he ended up cable tying his helmet on so he couldn't take it off.
Jeffrey McGonigal says Boom Boom 43. Dear McConnelly is mentioned a few times. Mick Lyons mentioned again here by Elizabeth Howard. More into tennis. He's a very good tennis player.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Jerry McEntee is mentioned by Joe Butler. Pete Finnerty says ML89. Himself and Brian Wheelahan were two Lamborghinis. One was a sports car, the other was a tractor. Let you guess which is which. Oisin McConville and Paul Flynn after their second captain's spat. Yeah, that was highly entertaining. Sylvian and Annan, well able to throw a punch. Limerick Seniors did a boxing camp at the beginning of 2018. Burns versus Hayes had a heavyweight scrap. Was not for the faint-hearted. Both looked handy.
That was brought up, Shane, actually. That was brought up after they won the All-Ireland as one of the things that really kind of bonded them together or whatever. Like, that sort of thing can really offer a lot for a club or a county team, yeah. But I remember, like Sir Hayes is about 6'5", Burns is 6'3" or 6'4", both tugging in at about 15 stone. Like, that's proper heavyweight stuff.
But when, like, just to go back to the Packy Collins sessions we would have done, once you finish that session, you have to completely empty yourself when you do a boxing session like that. There's no place to hide. You know, doing stuff. Oh, I remember it now. It was horrible. So I'd be standing, let's say, opposite you, and you'd hold some pads above your head, and I'd have to keep punching upwards like that for 30 seconds. So that seems simple. But when you're already tired and you've been doing it down low, and then you're trying to do it upwards like that for 30 seconds, oh, Jesus. You just want to be anywhere except in that gym. So, you know, after you've kind of really emptied yourself, there's a great sort of a camaraderie around the boys or girls in a female dressing room. There is that sort of great shared experience, and right, we got through that or whatever. It does help build the dressing room vibe.
Oh, big time. And like, if you're looking at it, like, as sports that are all around kind of full body exercises, I'd say they don't come much better than boxing. Like, they are, I put probably boxers and basketball players are the ultimate athletes for me, I'd have to say. The basketballers run and jump higher and run faster than anybody else, where the boxers, like, the cardio and their ability, you're talking about 30 seconds there, punching for 30 seconds. Like, you know, in any sort of a decent boxing fight, you're punching for 36 minutes. It's phenomenal, really. And like, the ability of someone like Fury to be knocked down twice and to be seeing stars and to come back and still be, you know, so dominant thereafter. It's probably the ultimate fitness, I'd say, boxers have it.
Yeah, it's great. Like, genuinely, you feel unreal after it. Actually, we did a session several years beforehand with Michael Carruth also, and this would have been maybe 2011, something like that, back when I had a small bit of fitness going for me. And you're supposed to be in the ring and just doing body shots. I got carried away. There was a young lad about 19, I suppose. I was about, 30 at the time. Give him a bloodied nose. Sure, look, it probably hardened him up a small bit. We did say that.
Maybe so, yeah. Either that or he didn't come back. I'm just thinking, because we're obviously both sitting on chairs here. Did you see did you see the corner chair that Fury was sitting on the other night?
Yeah, your big dosser.
Picture of Wilder getting knocked out and big dosser on it. In fairness, yeah, you couldn't agree with a lot of Fury's views, but it's hard not to be fascinated by him.
He's an incredible boxer. I mean, he doesn't look like he should be able to box. By the way, that's another thing. Is there any hurlers or even Gaelic footballers out there who you're thinking they should be absolutely useless? I don't know, whatever it is about them, they look like they shouldn't be effective, but they end up being really good. I'd love to get people's thoughts on that.
I'd say it's probably not as prevalent. I don't think it would be as prevalent now as county level, because generally, especially with the skin tight jerseys as well, like there's not guys out of shape, or you don't have a lad coming in your county level and thinking this lad is useless. But you might at club level, you might have somebody coming in that's carrying a bit of timber, and you're just thinking, I'm going to run rings around this lad. Then all of a sudden the ball comes in, he catches it, snaps it to the net or something like that. There were definitely it probably would have been more prevalent in the 90s, I'd say. Again, like if you looked at someone like Paul Shelley, you're not going to think that this lad could destroy you, but he would absolutely destroy you.
John Carroll, as mentioned here by Niall Folkley, Gary Kirby and Colin Corkery mentioned here. Hard to like Fury and his good friends with Daniel Kinahan. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
that's a fair point. Yeah. Corkery, I think Corkery is nearly the ultimate example. If you looked at him and you're, a fit guy in your mid-20s, 13 and a half, 14 stone, real mobile, and you see Colin Corkery, you're coming in and you don't know him, you're thinking, I'll have you today, and all of a sudden this lad just has skill coming out of every orifice. Like I don't know if you listened to there a while back, he did on Tomás O'Shea's pod, he did an interview. It's just absolutely, it's just comical, and he talks about his time over in Australia and how they had to do these 10k runs, and he jumped on what was basically the equivalent of the tram or the Laois going around Dublin. He jumped on that in Melbourne, and the boys would be doing running. He'd have a pass for the tram, jump on the tram, go for about 5 kilometers, then jump off the tram, and then all of a sudden, they realized that he was cutting corners or whatever. And I think he even said he was going to pay in for his expenses and this kind of crap for the tram. And it's just brilliant. A real kind of throwback character. Yeah,
Billy Byrne would be another one that comes to mind there.
Big time.
Dowling for Limerick, unreal player, but didn't look like he had the body shape, but he still put me to shame, says Red Lad. Yeah, obviously very effective. This is an unusual one. Jack McCaffrey did not look like a top-level athlete, but that man could move and ball. Yeah, but he is lean as a butcher's dog, but just the size of him, he's quite small. So his stride length would obviously not be the same as Kyle Hayes, for example, who's probably not far off a foot taller than him. But by God, the lad's speed is unbelievable.
Yeah, funnily enough, Shane, I like, this is just my own personal opinion. I wouldn't have said he's that lean. I would definitely have said his body shape is a good bit different. I'd say he lives by his own rules to some extent. I wouldn't say he's following a nutritionist to the letter of the law. I think he was a bit of an individual in that respect, but it worked for him. And whatever he had, he obviously clearly had a natural kind of a speed gene as well. That just kind of set him apart. Andrew Sullivan mentioned Donald Nugent. He would be another one. Just to look at him, you could just kind of think maybe this guy is a big kind of an awkward guy. Then he comes in on you and he's just like, did he get a couple of goals for St. John's last year? He only had one hand in a match, I think.
He got a hat-trick in that game.
Yeah. Do you know,
I think I mistakenly said he was the Donovan Rossa the other day. He's St. John's, of course. But look, you'll forgive us the odd mistake. A couple of more comments in. Jimmy Keaveney, to be honest, he did look like he just walked in off the street when he was playing football, but by God, he was unbelievably effective. Like Verney mentioned earlier, that Davy Clark picture with Kyle Hayes shows how much the game has changed. Tony Sack, Walsh from Wexford. There's actually a guy, Gerard Henderson of Kilkenny. There's a guy that plays with Crave Kieran. I'm not sure if he's playing anymore, but he's certainly a little bit bigger than the normal player would be around the waist area. I'm not actually trying to slate, but unbelievably good hands, just brilliant hands. And we would have had good full-backs and cornerbacks on him over the last number of years with Kula, and he gave plenty of them a rough time of it, because he was just hard to get around, but then he had the hands to go with it and the flicks to go with it too. I'd say every parish in Ireland has a player like that. And
the thing is as well, Shane, is to know what you have and use it. Like I'd always say, at times, I would not been disingenuous. A big arse can be a benefit to you if you know how to use it. Like if you get down over a ball and you're kind of sticking your rear back into someone, they can't get in around you. It's all about knowing how to use what you have. If you don't have lightning speed and you have you're how should we say, you're a bit more voluptuous than some others. You need to use what you have to your strengths.
Niall Heffernan says, had a brief chat with Shane O'Donnell a few years back, was amazed how small he was. It's just nuts when he takes on Daithí Burke and is strong as a bull. He's actually, I remember interviewing him several years ago, and he was asked what his interests are. And I mean, at this stage, he had no real interest in watching hurling outside of playing it himself. And his big thing was that video game Dota, I think it's called. I'll look it up and see if that's a thing. Yeah, that seems to be. Yeah, actually, the first thing that comes up online, Dota 2. Every day, millions of players worldwide enter the battle as one of over 100 Dota heroes in a 5v5 team clash. No idea, but there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, millions are at it.
Yeah, he is probably someone you look at and say that he punches above his weight in many ways. There's guys like that as well who you wouldn't say this guy is that physically strong. I would say like Shane O'Donnell takes more punishment than nearly any player in the country for a guy.
You call him the most foulable player in Ireland.
Yeah, him and Colin Fennelly are battling for the most foulable award.
Wow, what an award to get. Hey, look, I'm going to bring it up on screen here, as you are a big Offaly man and I'm a Tipperary man, and it's not that often we get to reflect on olden days when our two counties played against each other because you're never at the top table. But let's have a look at this here. This is 1989. Ball flying in there, lovely by.
Look at the stroke tree pulls here.
Yeah, oh, that's a beautiful.
Look at the stroke John Try pulls back on 13. Yeah. Like Nisha Waldron had a video up the other day doing the John Try flick. This is kind of like a John Try flick, but maybe in a different type of a way. The number 3, somebody tagged me on Twitter. They tagged you as well, asking was this me, because it was tidy corner back play. But it's a club mate of mine, Damien Gigger Gagan. Yeah, he was gigging that day too. That's an absolutely awful stroke. There could easily be, that's another clubman, Brian Hennessy, cornerback as well, obviously. And Brian Whelan was in the picture too, and then John Try. But it's just a real throwback. Like, the ball wouldn't have even made it to the square if that was now. I'd say it would have been blown up long before that. But I tell you, was that what Tipperary player was that coming through with the ball? Was that?
I'm not even sure.
Yeah, well, I tell you, I'm not too sure who it was. But by Jesus, there was no stopping him. You could have hung hurls around his neck, and there was no stopping him.
It speaks to the hardiness of the tip man that he stayed going. Am I right?
Yeah, no, you have to really respect that now, in fairness.
Yeah, Ken Hogan replied to you on Twitter saying that you were only a toddler when that would have happened.
Yeah, I think that was the 89 under-21 final, yeah.
Yeah, which I'm fairly sure, I can't remember the details, but I think Michael Dignan referenced whatever speech was made, possibly by Declan Ryan after that, as a reason of his maybe distaste towards Tipperary while he was a player. Now, when he's done any analysis since, I don't pick that up, so I'm sure the passage of time, all that changes. But definitely that game, so there seemed to be something about that game. It might have been a reference to the fact that he had lost to Antrim in the All-Ireland semi-final, some sort of
could have been, yeah.
Little comment, maybe a little bit of a snide.
There was 30,000 people at that game, Shane. 30,000 people at an under-21 final. Like, those, Offaly were after winning 3 minors within 4 years, 3 All-Ireland minors. Brian Whelan had won a minor, his 3rd minor that year, and was on the under-21 team, along with a couple of others. And that was kind of the golden generation of Offaly. Funnily enough, Offaly won 3 All-Ireland minors and couldn't win an under-21. That was the start of, I think they were beaten in 3 under-21 finals. They were beaten again in 92. Were beaten by Waterford with Tony Brown and Paul Flynn and all them as well. But just some real great finals, great clashes.
Yeah, if there's any other good clips that you've seen from the olden days, send them on and we'll have a look at them someday.
But that's the appetite, Shane, there as well. That's the appetite there would have been for Offaly and Tip to it. Like, if Offaly and Tip should have met in 89, if Antrim hadn't maybe done a number on us, but there is massive appetite for 2 neighbouring counties to meet in big games.
And if Tony Keady hadn't been done out of it too, by the way.
Yeah, well, that's true, yeah.
You could have actually ended up with a Galway Offaly final. Would that have been a better final? It probably would, obviously, because Tipperary won so handily. But Flash here is talking about the Jack Grealish of hurling when it comes to winning fouls. You must be referring to Shane O'Donnell there, because that comment came up a minute ago.
And I mean that to Shane O'Donnell in the best, like, that is the best way possible. Yeah. He's not playing for frees. He's just so foulable.
The steps rule doesn't apply to Colin Fennelly, says John O'Sullivan. Not entirely sure what he's jumping in on the back of there. Maybe to do with the video, how many steps that the tip man had going through. Elizabeth Howard isn't so sure about Dignan, that he still has an anti-tip agenda. That's his problem. By God, Elizabeth, you haven't spared him there.
I'm wondering, is that Liz Howard, the former Camogie Association president? It could well be.
Let us know, Liz. Let's see. What are we jumping on to next, Mike?
We'll go into the county finals, I'd say. Obviously, Antrim county final was on the box yesterday. I only saw bits of it, but by all accounts, Dunloy were brilliant again as a secure 3 in a row. You saw a bit more of this now than I did.
Yeah, I was watching. I was a little bit disappointed in O'Donovan Ross. Like, first time there in 17 years. And you know yourself, sometimes the occasion can get to you. And I was wondering, was that the case early on? Because it looked like Dunloy were going to kick on. But, you know, O'Donovan Ross, they settled down, steadied down. They had it back to maybe a point or two. And it looked like, all right, they can mount a serious challenge here. But it just didn't happen. And a couple of times, like I kind of remarked as the game was going on, I might even just reflect on some of my tweets from the time, but that they were almost inviting some issues onto themselves, that I think once or twice they played balls to each other in the back line, miscontrolled it. And I think that allowed Chrissy McMahon to knock in the first goal. There was a couple of other scores where they had opportunities to do something with the ball, and they either got blocked down or they got turned over. And all of a sudden then you find them, you know, conceding scores at the other end. So that was a bit frustrating to watch from their point of view. Yeah, I had it like, I was just tweeting there during the match, and I had Dunloy ahead 1-3 at the first water break that Rossa had steadied. But then for the next goal that they had a chance to clear the ball, and, you know, they obviously allowed Dunloy in. So those other goals came from Conal Cunning, who we know is a very good player, and Sean Elliott, he scored 2. And then after getting 5 of the first 6 points in the second half, and a brilliant one from Keelan Malloy, that made it 3-12-7. So from there on, it was just a case of holding on out. And they made a bit of a burst, Rossa, to be fair. Beattie, he scored a goal, and a few other lads, like the likes of McGuinness there, got 3 points. Declan Murphy got a couple of points as well. A few lads did play all right or whatever, but like, unfortunately for Rossa, they just losing by 15 points and maybe can't have too many arguments. Just too many I'd say routine mistakes that allowed Dunloy, a team that had 1-2 in a row and know what it takes. It just allowed them to capitalise. And, you know, you might often lose a game by 5 points and you'd be like, fair enough. You might often lose a game by 15 points and you'd be like, do you know what? It was just our experience that bloated an 8-point loss into a 15-point loss. And there might have been a bit of that in this game too. And you know, also when you're chasing goals late on, that allows the other team to tag on the point too.
Yeah, it's difficult when they're playing their first final in a long, long time. Can be a bit overawed, particularly for younger players, and the occasion can just get the better of you. It's weird. It can go kind of one or two ways, but they're coming up against the Dunloy side that are really in their pomp, and it's a really, really like competitive Antrim championship. They're after winning 3 in a row. Just saw a tweet there from Brendan Crossan last night. He just said about Paul Shorty Shields. He just said the Benjamin Button of Antrim hurling, 6 county winners medals, 07, 09, 17, 19, 20 and 21. He's actually only 33, which kind of surprised me. He finished up with Antrim at the end of 2017, but he's just one of a star-studded Dunloy team. And funnily enough, with the way it's kind of set up this year, and maybe different county championships going on at different times and different counties having split seasons where hurling before football or football before hurling, maybe this could be the year, you know, for, you know, an Antrim team to be the first one to make that kind of breakthrough since Lochiel won it in 2012. Shields, brilliant player. He was very, very good yesterday. And like, yeah, I'm interested to see now what sort of burst Dunloy can make going through the Ulster Championship, because they'll definitely fancy it. Their 3rd year in a row, they'll want to keep kicking on here. Saying that, Shane, to get out to the All Ireland semi-finals, they're probably going to have to beat Schlockneil along the way, more than likely. So, like, Ulster is no longer, you know, Antrim champions equals Ulster champions. So they're going to be, if they do get to the All Ireland semi-final stages, whoever it is, they're going to be well battle hardened anyway.
Yeah, ML89 says, interesting to see if Schlockneil will keep the Indian sign over the Antrim clubs. Dunloy have very good forwards, but might lack a few pigs in the nicest way. We know exactly what you mean there.
Yeah, exactly. Pig is a compliment, the ultimate compliment.
It sure is. Elizabeth Howard adds, Tony Keady played illegally in New York. Tip played no part in his suspension. That's true. The Connacht clubs were the ones, like their neighbours, they're the ones that actually voted against him. I was Tip GA PRO, and his great friend Brendan Linsky appealed to him not to play in New York. I knew both as they lived in Dublin at the time, Liz Howard. Okay, thanks for that detail, Liz. They appreciate that. And I know Tipperary obviously got away with it at the time because they had a player who played in New York, but of course he got away with it and Keady didn't. So the whole thing is, the whole thing is a bit of a disaster. And you know, did you watch Tony Keady's Laker Gale? And he was asked what he like on his epitaph. This is obviously a few years before he sadly passed away. And he said, here lies Tony Keady, should have played in 89.
Yeah, like that's like such an iconic thing to say as well.
Yeah. Do you know what? We made a bit of a mistake when we were teeing up the Longford hurling final the other day. Just a little bit of crossed wires there. But Longford Slashers are champions, first time since 2001. But yeah, we made a small boo-boo there, didn't we?
Yeah, I think we actually previewed the under-15 final, and it was Carrick against the Slashers. And it was
And it's the
that's
under-15 final in Wicklow we should have been previewing.
Yeah, that's true. The under-15D final, and that's actually Carrick from Leitrim who seemed to play their underage hurling in Longford, which had obviously been near neighbours, which is a great idea because it probably helps competition in both counties where there wouldn't be a huge amount of hurling clubs. But as you said, the Slashers won their first title in 20 years. Wolf Tones have 20 county titles and are the real kingpins in Longford, but they were turned over the other day, and a lot of the damage was done in the first half. The Slashers got 4 goals in the first half, and the game was kind of over at half time. They were up 4-6 to 1-7, and they were just able to hold them at arm's length thereafter then.
Yeah. Okay. So we were kind of talking also, another thing we were talking about beforehand as well as the Fury Wilder thing, was Ireland beating Azerbaijan 3-0 the other night. Now, for me, it was brilliant to see a team that's, got plenty of limited players, we know that, but trying to get the maximum out of themselves, played the ball around, actually worked it really well. You're watching this team now and they've had terrible results, and this was the first competitive win under Stephen Kenny. But you're thinking maybe finally it's coming together. And you asked the question then, are there any examples of GA managers that badly needed a result, and when they finally got it, things started to kick off? Let's hope that that's the case for Stephen Kenny and from Ireland. Like, it was just brilliant to see a victory like that. I was delighted to see Callum Robinson getting a couple of goals after all the virtue signalling that was rammed down his throat during the week. And I actually put up a poll too, because I think an awful lot of it was media making a huge thing out of the Callum Robinson thing, and the average person, yeah, maybe they mightn't necessarily agree with him, but they don't want to kind of burn him at the stake for it either, just because he has said that he's not vaccinated. And I just thought it was so egregious that people were openly asking him at a press conference if he is. I mean, it's the lad's personal health. How dare you ask him? But anyway, he scored the goal, and I kind of tweeted, or 2 goals, and I tweeted, did people actually cheer when he scored the goal? Because I wanted to figure out, is it a case that people actually really had it in for him, or was it a case that media were making a huge amount out of it? So I just did a poll that lasted 2 hours, 412 votes. Did you cheer for Callum Robinson when he scored his goals? And 86% said yes. So to me, while it's not entirely reflective, and some people would probably clarify that, look, I don't like him, and I wasn't cheering for him, I was cheering for Ireland's score and whatever. But 86% to me says that a lot of the witch hunt isn't reflective of what the average person thinks.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you there. It was prime kind of conditions for people to use the double jab pun after. I think I saw that in nearly every Sunday paper. Somebody put it up online, I'd say, and everybody saw it and was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna have myself a bit of that," because it was absolutely everywhere. But hopefully Ireland will go on to better things, and it'll always be. I always kind of the metaphor I'd use is that the dam will burst. I hope that the dam will burst now as a result of that. And there's plenty of examples in the GA. I'm sure. Like, I always think of localized examples when I think about this. When someone needs a result, 2 would definitely stand out within Offaly. So Kilcormac Killarty had been beaten in plenty of county finals, and we had been their bogey team, really. We'd beaten them in a couple of semi-finals, a couple of county finals, and they beat us in a county semi-final in 2012 by a point, and several things. I remember Trevor Fletcher actually took a free that day, missed the pickup, and sideline cut the ball over the bar, and they ended up winning by a point. And it was just this massive weight off their back. They went on to win Offaly and Leinster that year. Were beating the All-Ireland Club final. They've won probably 4 or 5 county titles since. That would be one, just on the back of one result. Rhinus would be another one. They were beaten in county finals in 12, maybe 14, 15, I think. And they beat us in the county final again. Unfortunately, we're the common denominator. They won in 16, then they won in 19, then they won in 20, and they're favourites to win it again in 2021. But it's when you eventually get over the line, it's the weight of expectation that's off your shoulders, and now all of a sudden you can express yourself. And Rhinus are a prime example of they maybe would have lost games towards the end because they hadn't got over the line. Now they're the team that if they're in a match anywhere near the end, you think that they're the ones that are going to finish strongly, because it's almost this muscle memory that's built up having eventually got over the line. So, like, any examples to you, county examples, club examples of when that release valve is taken off, that teams can just totally flourish?
I would say I can think of one for like Liam Sheedy. I would imagine that Offaly performance in 2010. So remember after getting hammered by Cork, and this was, having gone so close against Kilkenny the year before in the All-Ireland in 2009, got battered by Cork and then went in the back door. And I think, were you on the Offaly panel at the time?
Yeah, I was. I think it was doing hurls the same day.
114 or something?
I think it was 121 to 112. I could be wrong.
Okay. It was something like that anyway. So Tipperary laboured through that game, but then began to kick on from there. Now, maybe we're never necessarily in fear of losing that game or against Wexford the next day. So maybe the real performance was actually against Galway in the All-Ireland quarter-final. Remember, towards the very end of the game, I always remember John O'Brien catching puckouts and being really important at that in that part of the game, but also Pa Burke setting up scores in the last couple of minutes. So I'd say that one stands out for me. Flash says John Kiley for us against Kilkenny. I'm sure that's 2018. Not that he was under pressure, but that was a huge win for us. Not just getting to an All-Ireland semi-final, but beating Kilkenny. So would there have been any other ones?
Tipperary against Offaly, and that was 21 points to 112, and Shane Dooley got the goal at the very end. But it's funny that you're after naming, there's probably 3 results, and it kind of almost built up to that Galway result. Like people probably forget about that. Lar did this little merry-go-round kind of circly thing to put over an outrageous point to win the game. Then all of a sudden, 4 or 5 weeks later, Tipperary blow Kilkenny away in an All-Ireland final.
Yeah. 2012. Okay, so is there cases whereby you could win a game and it mightn't stand to you that year or the next year, but ultimately it's crucial for the development of the team a couple of years down the line? So I'd say with Coola 2012, Ballyboden had won a 5 in a row and we had a winner-takes-all final group game against them and we beat them. And I'd say that was probably the making of the team, even though the team didn't win the county final until 2015. But that kind of broke the stranglehold at that stage that Ballyboden had and probably gave us the belief. Now, we went on and lost the county final to Crokes, but I do think it was a big thing for the team.
Back to Liam Sheedy again, and this is actually a game that they didn't win, but the way they put it up to Kilkenny in the league final in 2009 made them believe, they went all the way to extra time, actually made them believe that they could do what they were going to do. It was probably about 18 months later in the 2010 All-Ireland final. Be interesting to hear. I think the Limerick one against Kilkenny is a really, really good one. It was in the rain. I remember Tom Morrissey saying after that they wanted to make their own history. It was just a real kind of pressure kind of lifting performance almost. And I'm sure within everybody's county they can think of an example maybe where that has happened.
Yeah, keep the comments coming in here. Niall Heffernan says, Adair won their first county championship in 2001 after being in loads of finals, beat their near rivals Patrick's well out the gate and went on to win 5 counties over the decade. Some teams like Thurles Sarsfields, they would have that also. I'm sure it's happened with Offaly as well. There must be a sort of a signature win they had en route to maybe winning that All-Ireland back in the early 90s.
Oh, Jenny Mac. There was probably a couple that set the template. Beating Kilkenny in the 1980 Leinster final, having been absolutely destroyed by them since hurling's history began, was a massive one. And funnily enough, Shane, that's exactly what you said earlier. They didn't get the benefits of that maybe until the year after when they did win the All-Ireland. I think they were beaten by Galway in the All-Ireland semi-final in 80. But they had the belief to go and win Leinster the next year, and even the experience of being in the All-Ireland stages and then to go on and beat Galway a year later. So that's probably a prime example of that, I'd say.
ML89 says Kilkenny against Cork in 2006. But I just wonder, the fact that that Kilkenny team, most of their players had already won an All-Ireland or two, is that quite the same level? Because, isn't this supposed to kind of release the valve a little bit and sort of allow you to access the quality that's there and kick on when maybe you've been held back psychologically or whatever beforehand? So I don't know, like, did Kilkenny have massive hang-ups in terms of being able to beat Cork before that?
If at that time Brian Cody had been beaten for a 3rd year in a row and hadn't won an All-Ireland, potentially maybe we wouldn't have seen what we did after. There's a fair chance of that, because they were beaten in 99 when he came in, they won in 2000, were beaten in 01, won in 02, won in 03, beaten in 04, 05. If they'd been beaten in 06 and Cork had done 3 in a row, history could be a lot different, funnily enough. So I didn't agree when I saw it initially, but I probably do agree now.
I retract my statement. That is huge.
That is rare air.
SSRI, Wexford in 96, winning the Leinster after a 19-year gap, beating Offaly and Kilkenny in the 1 year. I think, was it Gerald McMahon was talking about some league final they had? I can't remember if it was 94 or 96, maybe even 95 against Kilkenny. And he said it was the first, he told me privately, this is the first time they had ever gotten a bit of a look in a game. And then that was like a big part in them kicking on after that. And I remember saying to him, well, I mean, Declan Ryan's point went over against G, and that was it the 97 final, and that was waved wide. So you've gotten luck. Don't you worry about it. Be a good laugh.
But it's funny, there's often strange origins. John Kiley pointed back. We mentioned about the white collar boxing that they did. He pointed back to a league game against Offaly in O'Connor Park in 2018 as almost like the turning point. Which it's like, it's weird. Like when you're not inside a camp, you don't exactly know what people are thinking. But I think they really turned it on that day, and there must have been some sort of pressure coming into that game. But there's almost like unknown turning points within a camp that we don't know about. But like, just say going back to Coola, I wouldn't have thought about some game in 2012 as a potential turning point for what followed in the years to come. But when you're inside in a camp, you maybe know that there was more. How should we say, there was more strength or power placed on some sort of a result that may have seemed relatively meaningless to everybody else.
But also it's the manner in which you do it. So you go well ahead, the team pins you back, and you find a way to come through. I mean, that sort of thing is huge for belief, especially if you're a team that has lost a load of tight games over the years. And do you know what? That All-Ireland semi-final for Cork last year, this past season, beating Kilkenny after extra time. We've been talking about how there might be psychological damage from the final, but maybe the fact that Cork have finally won a few tight games, even jumped back 2 games before that to the Clare one when Tony Kelly could have won it. The fact that they've won a couple of tight games after for years probably leaving it behind them in tight games, maybe that'll be the making of them.
Maybe so. I still can't help but think that it's been offset by the All-Ireland final result, but I know where you're coming from as well. If they've been beaten by 5 or 6 in the All-Ireland final, they would have been coming in perfect for 2022. So it's going to be interesting to see how much stock is placed in those 2 tight wins as opposed to the All-Ireland final annihilation.
Yeah, ML89 says Galway winning league in 75 was the beginning of Galway being a force since. Clare beating Limerick 95 All-Ireland, says Joe 18 Ken. He adds Clare beating Limerick 95 Munster. Bazaroni and Cork haven't won since. Big win for Kilkenny. That's true. Obviously, you're referencing back to the 2006 game. Elizabeth Howard adds, true Shane, Declan Ryan needed Hawkeye as clearly a point. Absolutely was. Umpires. Then we know about John Lahey missing the goal chance that same year as well. Clare 95 says Patrick Hickey. Porter. Dermot Healy was some manager. Got them pulling together.
He's talking about Offaly back in 80 and 81. Yeah, he came in, like he took a county that with very little tradition of competing at any sort of a high level and brought them to dizzy heights, really, when you think about it.
John Maher adds in, Wexford v Kilkenny in 96 and Offaly hadn't beaten the faithful since 1979. There was a time when you put the fear of God into teams.
Yeah, like the whole way through the 80s and early 90s, like it was a massive surprise if Offaly were beaten in Leinster. And that's why, it was, Billy Byrne's goal against Kilkenny and, a few other bits and pieces happening that year that it's almost, in 96 in particular, just looked like the writing was on the wall for Wexford to do something really, really special that year. And in fairness, they did. It's so interesting when you go back to a lot of these kind of turning point wins. You could beat a team by, a point in a second round match or in a quarter final, and all of a sudden you're able to go and produce this unbelievable All-Ireland final performance where you could win by 10. It's gas, and Tipper probably the prime example of that in 2010.
Yeah, our sponsor Orga Retro's put in an answer to this as well. We'll bring it up on screen here. Eamon O'Shea was a bit under pressure in 2014 after exiting the championship early in 2013. 20 minutes left. Galway were 6 ahead in Thurles. Tip narrowly missed out in the All-Ireland that year by the width of the ball. And you know what? It was it was Lara Corbett that year. I remember that day he'd had a very quiet hour. I thought he was pretty poor, and then all of a sudden scored a brilliant rocket of a point over his shoulder from about the 45. Maybe even the 65, and another one after that. And I think it just lifted the whole stadium and ignited the entire season. That can happen for you. I wonder, did that happen for Clare in 2013? Obviously they beat Wexford in that qualifier down in Thurles. They went to extra time. The day that Mossy Waters went down with the cruciate and play went on. I wonder, is there a particular moment in that game, or maybe it was the Galway game when they beat a side that had gotten to replay at All-Ireland the year before. I wonder, is there a specific moment for them in 2013 where they feel it all clicked?
Look, Nan always points back to when they hammered Laois in the qualifiers and did 14 scores, I think, or 13 outfield scores. I think Donald Donovan was the only one not to score for play, and ironically scored that drawn point in the All-Ireland final in 2013. But that they produced a massive performance, and all of a sudden they were on the kind of pig's back and they were going to do something through the back door. But it is gas. Some performances have probably saved players, and some of these performances that we talked about have probably saved managers as well.
Do you know there's going to be a Limerick or a Clare man who's going to lead a team to glory in the Limerick Championship this weekend? John O'Mara of 6 Mile Bridge. He's over Patrickswell and they've beaten a Piercy 321 to 122. At the other side, Kilmallock are waiting in the final. They saw off Doon by 420 to 216, which is a fairly comprehensive enough scoreline, you'd have to say. Tony Considine is over them, as he has been for a couple of years there. So just to run through Patrickswell's victory over the Piercy. And you know, the thing that stood out to me is I'm looking at the team that we played in 2018 and wondering if some of the absences have caught up with the Piercy. The team has much changed. The likes of Alan Dempsey, didn't see him named in the team. Peter Casey, Mike Casey, they're not there. I don't think I saw Cathal King named earlier, just off the top of my head now, because there's so many games, it's hard to keep track of every single one of them. But the goals in this game came from Kevin O'Brien, great man to run through the ball, Patrick Kirby and Tom O'Brien. The Well were actually 9 points clear after 18 minutes, and they'd hit 9 wides compared to just 3 from the Piercy. So that'd give you a fair indication of how strongly they started the game. But you know, from the Piercy, Kevin Downs, he scored 7 points, 5 of them from frees. Keith Dempsey got a goal. Tommy Grimes and Ronan Lynch got a few points. David Dempsey got 3 from play. William O'Donoghue scored 2 in the fight back in the second half. But Brian Murray, that 2007 All-Star, I don't know if you saw some of the saves he made in the game. A couple of them were just instinct, reflexes, and that kind of helped Patrickswell get it across the line. But obviously having some players like Keane Lynch and Aaron Gallan and his brother Jason Gallan, who scored a beautiful sideline, and obviously I'm missing one other player, Aaron Gallan, Dermot Burns and Keane Lynch. I mean, what a backbone to your team. Yeah,
and Jason Gallan definitely looks like he's after taking a step forward. Been in around the Limerick squad. I think he was third goalie, was he? This year on the squad, but been in around that squad has obviously brought him on a lot. Funnily enough, he is third goalie because Barry Hennessy is the second goalie, and they're obviously going to come up against each other in the county final. But I'd imagine if they're ever short any numbers out the field, that Jason would probably be playing outfield and could be playing outfield in training games, because if he's the third goalie, to have 1 and 2 at either end, and he probably slips in somewhere else, so he's probably ideal in that respect. But him, obviously Kevin O'Brien coming into it as well, and Brian Murray, who's 14 years after getting his All-Star when Limerick got to the All-Ireland that year, is still doing it. And there was loads of elder statesmen still doing it over the weekend. Brendan Cummins is still doing it for Ballybacon Grange. I think he made a couple of saves in a penalty shootout, and then
3.
that picture was circulating then of him consoling. Was it the Arravale Rovers goalie? Yeah, just pure kind of class. But it is great at club level that lads can kind of stay going to an older level, particularly if you're a goalie. It's the dream position if you want to stay hurling till you're 50, realistically.
Yeah, who are the biggest icons that are still operating at club level? One that jumps out to me, of course, is Owen Kelly, who's going to be against my native Borrislee next Friday in a county quarter final. That's going to be a brilliant one. And even just the fact that he helped, and Paul Curran is there too, helps take Mullinahone from the second tier of the senior championship in Tipperary up to the top tier this year. And now they're into the quarter final after top of their group. That's fair going. So who else is out there? We're going to talk about Owen Larkin in a while, and the fact that he came on for the Village in their victory over the weekend also. Who are the legends that are still out there operating?
Yeah, there's a load of boys still doing it. I think Conor Gormley actually came on for his club at the weekend and was influential. I think he's
Carrickmore, is he?
Yeah, I think he's Carrickmore. I think he's 41 as well. I think Aidan O'Mahony rolled back the years, didn't he, for Rathmore a couple of weekends ago in the Kerry Championship as well. I see the Stacks are back in the Kerry County Final. That's the Kerry Club County Final. I wonder, I didn't see, but I presume Donaghy is still going. And John O'Sullivan mentions Tommy. I think, is Tommy 38 or 39 now as well? He got a crucial goal for Tullaroan at the weekend. So it's great to see lads, as long as the body still allows, that they're still doing what they can for their clubs.
Yeah, Niall Heffernan says injuries goosing the Piercy, especially in goals and full back line. Pádraig Kennedy obviously wasn't in the goals. Having said that, the Well worked harder in the end. As long as I'm listening to the Limerick Championship, Doon have always been missing one of their big players through injury. It's a ridiculous run of luck the last few years. Yeah, we've seen cruciates for the likes of Richie English. We see Barry Murphy has it this season. Darrow, like even Darrow Donovan was missing for some of last season, although I don't
missed the county final, I think. Yeah, Richie English was brilliant from the clips I saw. Anyway, he scored a point or two from long distance from wing back. He left in a long delivery for a goal that ended up in the back of the net as well. But definitely, I remember that he probably won't put his hand up, but I remember one of our viewers said that Doon would win handy last week, and it did look like, let's call a spade, it did look like it would be a Doon, a Piershick final. And then I'm kind of thinking, is there anything to be said for the two teams that get through to the semi-finals, both playing quarter-finals the week before? Like Kilmallock were not that impressive against South Liberties the week before, but they obviously were able to find their form.
And extra time, didn't they go extra time?
Yeah, extra time as well. They were obviously able to find their form. And the same with Patrickswell. Patrickswell were down 2 points to Adair in injury time, weren't they, before they reeled off 5 in a row or something last week. So Jason Gallan, I think, got 4 of the 5. So they were obviously, both of them were primed for this weekend after that.
So if, let's say, Patrickswell go on and win an All-Ireland this year, now that would be some jump from how far they've gone previously. That could be the game that we talk about. Like we've touched on that topic already. What was the day that got you going, that put the fire under you and made you believe that you could do something?
It's only a tiny spark, Shane, isn't it, though? Like, you've seen it in a dressing room. It's like, you know, after being bet or something like that by a point, and you're after winning by a point, all of a sudden, you know, the chest is out, and that's all you need is one sort of result. Like, I'll put it to you this way: Coola must be playing the quarter final this weekend.
Ballyboden.
Like, in my head, I'm just, as a, you know, an impartial person looking in, I'm thinking that game could go either way. I'm thinking if Coola win that game by a point, they could be in a Leinster Club final. But if they lose, obviously they're out. Do you know what I mean? It's just a massive game where if they can get over the line, things might just all of a sudden fall into place. Lads find form, and they could go on this brilliant run, like, you know.
Yeah, it is brilliant the way, like, there's just very little in it in terms of like success and failure separated by so little. Like when we do these club power rankings, which we will do very, very soon, it's just when there's so many teams left in so many county championships at the moment, it just feels like you'd be just completely kind of scratching in the dark trying to pick this out. We'd probably put Ballyhale in at number 1. I'm sure we're going to agree that they are looking for a 3 in a row of All-Ireland.
We're not far away off having all the kind of knowledge that we need, if you know what I mean, from looking back through all the clubs. So I'd say probably either next Monday or Thursday week, I'd say, be the prime time to do it.
Yeah, let us know, people, when you want us to do the club power rankings, and we definitely want your comments in too, for sure. Let me just see here. Flash says, I was on the Doon winning the county train, but the hand game did rattle me a bit when it came to them. Another comment in here from Elizabeth Howard. Owen Larkin still very impressive and made a contribution when he was introduced. Went to Nolan Park yesterday. Shamrocks ahead of all the teams, even without the Mullins brothers. So it'll be interested to see how quickly Adrian and Darren can get back. Let's see. Kieran Carey is 50 and still playing. I think he might be 51 or 2 even at this stage.
Jerome O'Connell was on, wasn't he? Was that last week, saying that they have basically this star-studded junior B team, a load of legends with, did he say something like 21 county medals or county senior medals, and they're all still going at it to try and win a junior medal. And that's one thing I love about, essentially, when you go back playing junior or intermediate, there'd be conversations had in the background between boys that played senior together for years. Go on, we'll go for the junior. We'll get 4 or 5 of us and go for the junior for this year. And that is what happens in every club. And that'll happen with you in Coola, and it'll happen with all sorts of other boys. It'll happen probably with me and Burr, where myself and lads my age, like Paul Cleary and Sean Ryan and these lads, Stephen Lonergan, will say, come on, we go back and try and win a junior or something when we're all goosed at senior level, you know.
Jeez, you've listed out a fair selection of grades there.
Beauts.
Great programme, and both of you know your stuff as opposed to many others. Well done. Have to leave, says Elizabeth Howard there. No doubt a bit of work to do there. Kilkenny County Championship wide open with the Borough going out by a point, says Bazzaroni. Didn't Dahi Burke and Johnny Pilkington come back there for a couple of years?
Dahi Regan and Johnny came on for the juniors a few years back. Needless to say, they were loose fitting jerseys, and the boys were fairly thankful for it.
Just to even go into Kilmallock's win over Doon a little bit, that's their first county final, I think, now since 2017. Oisin O'Reilly was man of the match. He scored 2-4, and all 6 goals came in the second half. Kilmallock were 16 points to 10 ahead at half time. and they just saw it out there towards the end of the game. So 420 is some nice score, and 321 from Patrick as well. So they both put 24 scorers up there. We look forward to that county final in a few weeks. Is Dan Shanahan still playing age 43, says Joe LK20. He was playing this year for Lismore. Is he 43? He's 44 actually. 44, he'll be 45 next season. Fair going from him. Obviously a legend of the game. We talk about Cork. I don't know how much you saw of it over the weekend, but the Rockies, they were very impressive in seeing off St. Finbarrs. It was on telly yesterday. 322 to 21 points. Alan Connolly shot 2-9, 2-6 of that in the second half. Just looks like such an exciting player. And, you know, some of the other forwards and players they have in there, like some Michael Halloran, who we've seen in the county scene before, Robbie Cotter, an underage player who's definitely got some class there. Cashman at centre-back, he was very, very good, mopped up a world of ball. But the Bars, I was disappointed in them. So they actually could have gone through anyway. But it was it Aaron's Own hit a late point to draw 123 to 220 against Charleville. And that grabbed them a knockout place with the Bars. They're going to be very frustrated because the Bars were up by 10 points on Aaron's Own 3 weeks ago and ended up drawing. So that's what's cost them here. And go through that forward line. And think of the coming Cork underage stars. And look at Brian Hayes, Ben Cunningham, who's coming on for the under-20s this year, Jack Cahalan, who I think looks brilliant, Conor Cahalan, who's very quickly established himself with Cork. I mean, they have all these players in the forward line. And I tweeted before the game, I think they could become a dominant force. Now, obviously, Blackrock are defending champions here. She's very, very disappointed in them, I have to say. I mean, when you think of that class there.
It's a difficult one, Shane. You have to have the mixture of class and youth.
And pigs.
Not been smart, yeah, you do. Especially at club level, especially when we start getting to this time of the year. You need experience around that. It's like when we've been picking, the best 15 in the country and you're putting 6 forwards. You're not going to put 6 dandy forwards. You're going to put a classy mulliker or 2 in there as well, because you just need. How are you going to get the ball to all these really good players? Who's going to do the donkey work a lot of the time for these players? So sometimes the balance of a team can be a bit off if you just have a load of really good hurlers. I know that might sound a bit stupid, but that's the way hurling is. It's the way any sport is, any team sport. You need a mixture. There has to be a balance to your team. They definitely are a common side, but they're probably going to need maybe a bit more kind of experience, particularly at, they're coming in off brilliant under-20 campaigns with Cork. A lot of those guys, and Conor Cahalan, obviously, with a really good senior campaign with Cork, but just maybe need that bit more experience at probably senior club level. It's different than playing underage hurling. And you would say that anyone that's come through that kind of underage sphere to play adult hurling, it's a different story. Who was I listening to the other day? I was listening to James Skettle the other day, actually. He was just saying about all the underage titles they won, that he won with Galway. And they came through at senior level, and he said he thought he was going to win 5 or 6 All-Irelands. And like he said, he was delighted to get away with one after, because when you come up with senior level, it's just a different world. And senior club hurling is different. It's just different than underage as well. It takes time to acclimatise to it.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Blackrock's ability to scramble back in defence. So when St. Finbarrs managed to run down the centre and have them on the back foot, break the line, if you want to use that rugby term, you thought, right, okay, Bars are in here for a goal or a point or whatever, but the amount of time that Blackrock lads got back and got a hook in, or, I don't know, just turned the player backwards or whatever, like Ben Cunningham, he got through in the first half and you thought certain goal, I'm pretty sure it was Ben Cunningham, and someone hooked him, and it just, if Bars had to get a goal or 2 early on in the game, you thought they'd have been in the right spot to win this game. But you can't deny the work rate of the Rockies there, and obviously they're imbued with the confidence that you get from winning a county title. And when I've mentioned some of their class forwards there, they're probably a team that can maybe set themselves up to collect a nice few titles here. But Ben Cunningham is so big, he must be 6'6", 6'5", size-wise, a bit like maybe Niall Kenny of Burrisley, absolutely huge player, or maybe even Derek Honan. Derek Honan's probably a little bit bigger again. So I think when Cunningham gets more experience, he'll probably even be more effective in these games, because once or twice, it's at senior level, you're going to get caught if you do any dilly-dallying on the ball, and once or twice maybe wound up a little bit too much and the Rockies lads got in to block him, or but that is just experience. He's a very young player, he was only coming on for the Cork under-20s this year, but he's very promising. Brian Hayes, obviously, he'll get more experience, make more of an impact. I think Jack Cahalan is going to be a senior star for Cork in a few years to come. I just wanted a little bit more from Damien Cahalan and Billy Hennessy in this game. They are the senior sort of players, maybe even Connor as well, to be fair. But Damien Cahalane, he came out with the ball in the second half and he went looking for contact when he didn't need it. Like, he was solo and he was free, he could just turn to his right and strike it down the field. Instead, he went looking for contact to his left, straight into a player, then tried to do a one-handed flick. The ball was instantly turned over and goal at the other end. And that's just not the sort, you just need your experienced players to just be a little bit cooler. Like, he gets a lot of criticism, and we give him a lot of praise, to be fair, to try and counteract that, because there are a lot of things that he does really, really well. And you can see he gives his all out in the field all the time. But just need a little bit cooler on the ball. And obviously some of the other players need to get experience a little bit more. And I have to say, John O'Sullivan's adding in here, Ben O'Connor and William Buckley still to come from the under-17 team. Barrs will be a serious team in 3 or 4 years' time. So yeah, that's his comment there.
Just on Blackrock, we talked about turning points. This could be a massive turning point. We just listened to the interview with Fergal Ryan as their manager. Remember the great cornerback of that team of the 99 and 2000, around that time. This could be a massive turning point for them, because it was a game that they had to win. They were beaten by Erin's Own already, and they produced, a massive performance when they really needed. Alan Conley in particular stepping up. I think he got 2-6 in the second half. And it was funny listening to his interview after, because you don't expect to be interviewed maybe on national television after winning a group game in Cork, and obviously the questions are going to be about winning another county title or whatever. They're miles away from that at the moment, and he was just running a mile and when those sort of questions were asked, and batting them away as politely and as quickly as he possibly could, because they have plenty of obstacles to get over before they get that far. But this could be a big turning point for them.
Yeah, you had to admire some of the footballing skills from some of the St. Finbarr's player. Don't know if you saw this, Ethan Toomey.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Like, yeah, in fairness.
You couldn't bait that with a stick now. And I think another one of their players did it as well. I'll see if I can get that video up. But another one of their players also tried a little kick up. If you give me 2 seconds, 1 minute
but Shane, there's been a lot of that from. We see one in the Cork minor game earlier on this year as well. They are definitely freestylers, a lot of those younger fellas, and they'll do whatever feels comfortable to them. It won't always be 2 hands down picking up the ball or anything like that, or 1 hand down picking up the ball. It'll be whatever kind of springs to mind. This was beautiful, yeah.
Am I right in saying that's fouling the ball, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the most ridiculous rule change, but that is technically fouling the ball, yeah. That rule was changed, I think, recently.
Yeah, players should certainly be allowed to do that, especially if you've been fouling your true own goals. What else, what can you do?
It's not as if he's heading the ball. Like, he's doing something from another GA sport. He's not doing anything wrong in my view.
And it requires a lot of skill to do it.
Yeah, outrageous.
Don't punish a guy for being skillful.
And it's not an advantage doing it. Like, you're not going to do. It's not going to gain a big advantage. It's just needs must. He'd no other way of doing anything with the ball. Like, that's like the Mark Rogers. Like, that's like 1/4 of what Mark Rogers did that day for Scariff when he off the outside of his right put it over the bar. It was beautiful.
Yeah, Conor Heaney points out here that Patrick Horgan got 2-13 yesterday. He did, as Glen Rovers beat Newtown Shandrum 220 to 219. 2-4 that coming from play, so he's obviously still doing an awful lot of damage there. Jamie Coughlin top scored for Newtown Shandrum at 1-7. Douglas are already through, but they qualified or had a third win in a row, beating Bishopstown 20 points to 110. Shane Kingston putting up 10 points. Also in the group here, in Group B, I should say, Sarsfields beat Middleton by 10 points. Both were already through anyway. Napier preserved their senior status after a 21 points to 16 win over Carricktool. So just read out the quarterfinals. Sarsfields have a bye to the semi-final, but the quarterfinals are Douglas against Blackrock, Erin's Own against Middleton, Glen Rovers against Immakilly. That'll be a bit of a classic now. Remember a couple of years ago, those people within Glen Rovers saying that divisional sides shouldn't be in the senior championship, and then also the relegation final to Carricktool are going to be against Charleville. A couple of comments in here. Blackrock being a hurling only club is a big help for their preparation, says John Horde. Barrs have Cahalanes playing football at Castlehaven and loads of dual players. Is Ben O'Connor going to rugby? Any word on John Conlon? Yeah, he got knee surgery, but it's not on a cruciate, so he'd be out for a bit, but I'd imagine he'd be back early next year. Anything you want to say on the Cork Championship before we just jump on?
No, I just wonder how many boy huggy boy were going around like when he was delivering the goods for Glen Rovers. Like, it'd be worth going down to one of them games when he's on fire just to hear what's coming from the stands and what's coming from the sidelines.
Yeah, for sure. I was watching the Tipperary preliminary quarter final on Friday. So Killinall, who had won the South, they were in against one of the second seeds, and Lockmore Castellini were the team that came through as second seeds. 221 to 12 points for a finish. it probably strengthened cause to break any links between the divisions in Tipperary and the county championship. Lockmore are obviously playing both codes, and the last thing they needed was to be drawn in a preliminary quarter-final when they're playing week after week after week. And you thought that maybe if Kilkenny pushed them all the way in this game, that it would strengthen cause to keep that connection between the divisions and the county championship. Because, it's 4 groups of 4. It's working really well as the championship. The Sean O'Reen, which is the next tier, is 4 groups of 4, working well. The intermediate, the same. And I understand when people say that they do want to keep the divisional link there within Tipperary, but it does, in some ways, hold back the progress. And, if you can move up through the tiers in the county championship, as Mullinahone have done this year, they won the Seamus O'Reen last year, and now they're up at this level in a quarter-final the following season. I mean, a bit like the inter-county season. You kind of have to have those layers and have teams playing at their level too. Because what's the point in seeing 20-point victories or, this was, I know we've seen bigger defeats than this, but a 15-point defeat here and the game was over after 10 minutes. It was 7 points to 1 at the first water break. It was done.
Would your suggestion be to get rid of that divisional link completely, or would that be played as a separate entity almost?
I'd say play it as a separate thing and play it while the inter-county look, a lot of people might freak out with me over this, and fair enough, because not everyone looks at it the same way. But while the inter-county season is going on, that's when I'd be playing the divisions and when I'd also be playing the league competitions. And then once that's over, have a little break, small little wind down for county players just to take their breath in between both seasons.
Can I just ask you on that though? There is a lot of history in the divisional within Tipperary. You'd still get massive crowds for North finals or South finals or whatever. Yeah.
I have a North medal from 05 or 07. So, but I completely understand that. I grew up going to all those sort of North games where you're in McDonough Park in Nina and you have a lad going around selling ice cream, screaming ices, get your ices and all that. I understand those days. But you do need to understand that the way it's run now with the county championship, the 4 groups of 4, it's really exciting. All of those groups most of those groups were really competitive, really strong, and the knockout stage now, the county championship, are really exciting. And Kilkenny, they're also in the Sean O'Reen. So, as we talked about last week, they could potentially be going for the Sean or Seamus O'Reen and the Dan Breen in the same season. And the whole thing is just a bit convoluted. And there is an opportunity for them to work themselves up the grades. Interesting, Laura, they had got through to the Shamrocks Arena final last year, and now they're actually in a relegation and potentially could go down intermediate. So it just shows you how finely balanced these competitions are. And look, Tipperary is kind of, I think, slowly working towards that direction. But
and they're coming up against Burgess in the Shamrocks Arena relegation game. Burgess and Laura would have been 2 of the favourites to win the Shamrocks Arena coming into the year. So it does, in fairness, your argument does highlight the competitiveness within the 2 championships.
But I do accept that some people love the tradition and don't want to feel like their team shouldn't be allowed to play against other teams in their division and all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, some teams are 20, 30 points. I talk about the Dublin Championship. There's teams being beaten by 40 points and you're like, why are there 16 teams in the top tier? This isn't good for anybody.
Can I just ask you on the South? So would Kilkenny have beaten many senior A teams to win the South?
I actually don't know who they beat to win that this year. I actually don't.
But there wouldn't be that many South teams in the senior A, would there?
No, it's not exactly stacked with teams that are pushing to win the county title this year. But just a reminder of who did the scoring. John McGrath, he scored a goal in the first after 17 minutes. He spinned Paddy Codd. I think people would know him from the county football team over the years. Noel McGrath kicked one home after in the second half. That put it 2-11 to 6 points in the second half water break and just cruised on from there. Quarter-final draw now. I'll see what you make of this. Lockmore Castleiney against Killerwan McDonagh's. That's a tasty game. A nice battle of mid and north there. Killadangan against Upper Church Strumban, similar enough in terms of mid versus north. But I'd say Killadangan will win that one and with a couple to spare. Mullinahone against Borrisoleigh, very interesting. That one's going to be Friday Night Lights. And we've talked about Friday Night Lights. It was something that Niall Morgan mentioned the other day. I'd love to see Friday Night Lights at inter-county games. And people let us know, would you like to see it too? It won't always be possible. You couldn't have Antrim against Clare as a Friday night game, but you could have Tipperary against Kilkenny, Tipperary against Limerick, Offaly against Laois, as an example of plenty of those. Wouldn't you love to see that Friday night at 8 o'clock?
Offaly played Limerick famously in a
Thursday?
qualifier on a Thursday night. Yeah, man, I think it was 2003. I was down at it. It was brilliant. Offaly won by 6 or 7, I think. But I don't know. It was during the summer. It just felt very, very novel, and there was a big crowd there, I think. So, like, as long as it's within reason and it's doable for players, and particularly players not living maybe in their home county and are going to have to travel, I think
But
it'd
if you
be a
get them
great
enough
idea.
notice, like if the fixtures
Yeah.
weren't a situation where we'll just decide on the week, a draw has been made this
You get
week.
you get the text the night before saying this game is on tomorrow under lights.
Yeah, well, like let's say you have the Munster and Leinster round robins, and all the fixtures are made several months beforehand. It's very easy to organise your life for a game 3 months down the line. You could be like, okay, I might need to get off an hour from work an hour early, or something like that. It can be more easily done if the fixtures are very obviously known a long time before that. And did I mention the other quarterfinal there? Thurles Sarsfields are against Clonotty Rossmore. So there's a tasty selection of games there, I have to say.
I think just talking about talking points as well. Didn't Lockmore beat Kilruan McDonough's to stay in it last year in a prelim quarterfinal or something like that? And I think it was at it. It was
on telly?
Yeah, it was on TV last year. And it beat them well enough in the wind-up. And all of a sudden they went on a run that easily could have ended in a county title. And they could well do the same this year. But that Kilruan seemed to be motoring a bit different now this year. There seems to be a bit of an edge to them this year. They're definitely finishing out games a lot better than they had in previous years. So that's probably the tastiest of 4 tasty quarterfinals, really.
Yeah, you wanted to talk about a tweet that you saw put out by coach Brendan O'Driscoll. Sunday dilemma: who do you pick in a championship team? The multi-talented player who has missed 50% of training sessions, or the very hard-working player who gives 100% all the time, never misses training, but has half the ability of number one?
So, I think this is a brilliant question.
Sure, isn't it the issue going on in every club every week?
Yeah, and just the caveat to this is it's not a county player that's missing 50% of the sessions. It's someone who's probably extremely talented, but is coming not when they like, but is kind of hit or miss, and will always be there the week of championship. Well, do you know the lads who will always be there when they have to be there? They put themselves in a small bit of a hole, but they're always there when they really need to be there. They'll miss that Sunday morning session maybe, but there's not a hope of them missing the Tuesday session where we're playing 15 aside and they get a chance to earn their place in the team or whatever. This is a really difficult one. From a manager's point of view, you're judged on winning games. You're judged on, trying to put your best 15 out and to win games, and you're going to be judged on results. But I don't know. I kind of always have the opinion of if I'm going to go down on my sword, I prefer to do it with players that are going to give me absolutely everything. And I know that player that comes 100% of the time and always gives that brilliant effort will not shirk any responsibility, will stay going till the very end, will appreciate the fact that I've stuck with them, or my management team have stuck with them over the fancy Dan who could do it one day but maybe mightn't do it another day. I'm of the opinion that I prefer to have those type of, not players, I prefer to have those type of people fighting for me if I'm fighting for my life, rather than the lad or the lass who might come and go, and in a match who might come and go as well when you really need them most. But it's a horrible question. It happens every weekend in the GAA in particular. It's an awful question, and I appreciate that you can be on both sides of the fence.
I think it's impossible to answer unless you're in the situation. Because, you could
speaking of fences.
Yeah, but you can call your panel if you've got decent players to kind of to build from. But if you're in a town that, let's say, has a bad culture, and you give a guy or a girl the flick out of the team and say, look, you weren't showing up training or whatever, and you lose, then the whole town is going to just attack you and say, sure, what are you doing not playing him? Sure, he's unreal. He's been there for 15 years, or 10 years or whatever. That's our best player there. And you leave him on the sideline. Sure, what do you think is going to happen? Get rid of this ape. You can't have him managing the team. So it's all well and good to say you give him the flick. We all want the best culture possible, but you're kind of juggling egos as well as everything else. So you nearly have to plumose some lads into coming down to training and to showing up and committing just enough so whereby you can get away with it. It's a bit like the whole drinking ban culture within GAA. It's a very fine line. I don't think a manager should ever say to his players, look, lads, if you go out drinking, I'm going to drop you, and that's the end of it. If word gets back to me, you're gone, because you're making a rod for your own back. You are snookering yourself straight away. And this is one good thing about Matty Kenny. I don't think he ever put a drinking ban on the team. But, you know, he would have always said, look, lads, you know yourselves, do the right thing. So that way you can sort of deal with the situation. Just depending on how things play out, you can sort of be like, okay, this is how I'll deal with it, rather than just, there's a blanket rule, if you drink, you're gone, because you have yourself cornered otherwise. So it's very difficult. And I just think it's similar to the drinking situation.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all for not painting everyone with the same brush. And I think you have to treat people differently within a panel. I think that's just the nature of it. You do, because there's different characters within squads. There's lads in squads that could be having 3 or 4 pints on a Friday night before a championship game on Sunday. But that works for them. That's the way they are. You can't, you know, tell them that can't tell X that he has to act the same as Y, because they're two completely different people. Culture is an interesting word that you mentioned there. I think a lot of it does come back to the type of culture you have within a club. You would hope that you're creating a culture where, you know, that person that's only arriving 50%, like 50% is an awful number. It's 1 in 2 that they're there for. Whereas if that's up at 80, 85 or something like that, it's a different story. You know, maybe he's missing a session because of work or family commitments or something like that. But the 50% is, you know, 1 in 2. I think it's a really interesting one, and it's something that probably managers agonize more about than anything else, I would say, because those calls do define you, really.
Yeah. I see like Donegal O'Donnell replying to that. If you want a player who's committed and invested and will give you a performance, 2. If you want a player who may or may not be brilliant, pick 1. In my experience, when the game is open, 1 will star. When you're in trouble, 2 will star. I mean, that is the whole thing. You have these great notions, and like Nisha Waldron, check out the video he did of the John Troy pickup. Said, if you're trying to create or change a culture, you pick the lad that's always there. Then again, it depends on why the person was missing training. That is true. You kind of have to take that into account. But unfortunately, like, it's just the ultimate horrible dilemma, because you know that the lad who's going to give you everything will do that, but like his limitations could end up costing you. And the other lad might come in and you might be carrying him to some degree, but a bit like Ronaldo against Ireland in the soccer a few weeks back, he just puts the ball in the back of the net, and he's doing it for United too. But like, he's up there, you're carrying him. Oh wait, he can put the ball in the net and no one else can.
Yeah, depends. It does depend on what you're trying to create. Depends how long you're in the job for as well, and how much certainty you have in your commitment maybe from the club. Just say you're an outside man coming into a club. If it's your first year and you think, outside of the guy that's showing up 50%, you think you have a lot of good eggs that are really committed, I think you can more afford to make a statement there. If it's, I'll put it this way, if it's potentially your last game in charge of a team and you need a win, then the call gets even more difficult. If it's
impossible.
If it's a loss and you're out the door, a win and you're potentially staying on for another year and you get to build again, it makes the question even more difficult, yeah.
Yeah, the drinking bans were the greatest load of crap that ever entered the GAA, says Nisha Waldron.
Absolute rubbish. I don't drink, and I encourage lads to drink, and particularly after matches, because I think it's a great thing for a team to do after a match, to go out for a few beers, win, lose or draw, digest it all, have a bit of crack, regardless of how you got on, and then, you know, be more united when you come to training again the next night.
Joe Butler quotes Alex Ferguson, always start your best players. But then again, the whole point is that came off the back of Ronaldo not being started. And I suppose it's easy to say it after the event. They draw a game and it gets hyped up to the last. There's also the argument that Christy Ring made about Jimmy Barry Murphy. You cannot legislate for genius, the supremely talented player selection. Yeah, it's true.
There's so many caveats and asterisks to this question, isn't there?
Yeah, everyone's answer is, well, I'd pick 1 if it was this and I'd pick 2 if it was that. That's the impossible thing, and the part of being a manager, that you don't really have that issue if you're over a professional team. I always mention NFL with this, that the worst team out of the 32 in the championship, every one of their players are trained to the most elite level going. And, you know, the difference can be having a good quarterback or not, or a good coach or not, that kind of gives your team the best chance to win. Because all these players, physically, they're all absolute geniuses and they're very fast and the whole lot. So it's those little things. Like, so a professional manager doesn't have to deal with this nonsense. I mean, we see it now and again in rugby where there is a culture of going drinking after games, or there certainly used to be, especially for the England team that was out throwing around smaller people around, like there were rugby balls back in, was it 2011 at that World Cup? But you just don't have to deal with this in professional sports normally the way that a GA manager would.
It's funny that you've said that, because Phil Jackson probably had to deal with it with Dennis Rodman in the middle of in the middle of championship games, which is really interesting. And I suppose his holistic view on things probably meant that. And I think a lot of it comes back to the conversation that you have with the player and how you can coax them along. And if you're delivering the message that they're not playing, how you delivered. And, we had to go with this guy. You're probably going to get in. We want you to come in and make an impact. We'll forget about all this. Whereas if some guy is dropped and there's no conversation had, then he could be sulking and he might be just no use to you whatsoever.
Yeah, Mark Corcoran, look at the difference Tom Brady makes to different franchises. Yeah, and look at where the Pats have gone downhill, and obviously the Bucks have gone from fairly average team to looking in decent shape to win 2 in a row Super Bowls. Elf Kedor 09 says, I remember seeing a guy at 3 a.m. fall around the town, and he was man of the match in senior championship final the next day. That is a sort of story here, but of course there's plenty of examples of a lad who'll have a few cheeky pints and he'll go out and be a disgrace the next day.
That's true, yeah. That's true.
It kind of works both ways. I got caught once or twice in league games. So I didn't realise there was a game on the next day. And so I ended up having 1 or 2 pints and, being scandalous. These things happen, don't they?
Yeah, well, at least the thing is, Shane, as long as you have an excuse, you're okay after the game. If you play badly and you don't have an excuse, you weren't out the night before, your preparation was perfect and all this, then you're in a bit of trouble.
Do you ever hear of the term performance insurance? So
yes.
Like for anyone who doesn't know this, there's a friend of mine, and like if I had a match coming up and I said, geez, the hamstring isn't feeling great, and he said, oh, a bit of performance insurance, is it? So this is something you say so that if you play poorly afterwards, you can say, actually, look, the hamstring wasn't great. Or if people get the word around it, or so, if word goes around the village or parish that a lad had, his back was bad coming into the game, so get the word out there. So if you play poorly, everyone will start.
That's awful. That's awful.
It's the performance insurance. Oh, he had a few pints there. Performance insurance. I wasn't actually that bad. It was just some other factor was the reason that I wasn't.
The funny thing about that, Shane, is that particularly at particularly elite club level and county level, there is no performance insurance at all. And I think people are just say like someone gets skinned in a game. Nobody knows, whether he was having, whether there were family issues the night before or whether he was sick coming into the game. You know what I mean? People are very harsh when you step between the white lines. You're there to be judged and people will judge you very harshly. And a lot of the time, people don't know really what's going on behind the scenes or if they're kind of mitigating factors for a poor performance in particular.
Yeah, I see a comment in here from the older you get, the longer the pints last. And there was another comment in here a second ago. Yeah, Padjo Clifford. Years ago in my club, one of the selectors gave a few lads a drop of whiskey before they went out into the pitch for a senior county final. They lost. I don't know if that's the reason why. But actually, I did an interview with Michael Cahill, former Tipperary hurler, and you can check it out in the playlist there in our game. And he talked about having a little half on the night before All-Ireland finals. And even, Billy Morgan, obviously the legendary goalkeeper in Cork, with Nemo Rangers, I think they were against Scottstown in maybe the 92 All-Ireland Club final. He had a drop of port at half-time because it was so freezing. That's
funny, because Shane, I was only thinking about this the other day. I was actually thinking back to that interview you did with Mickey Cahill. Because obviously, GA players aren't going to be breathalyzed before games or anything like that. But the jockey, Ushie Murphy, was to ride at Newmarket last Friday, and he failed the racecourse breathalyzer, even though he was below the drink driving limit. He was over the racecourse breathalyzer limit. And I often wonder, I'm only thinking back to, like, would there be many GA players that would have missed games if there had been a GA breathalyzer before certain games? And I'm certain that there would have been.
Without question. I marked the lad one day and I was nearly drunk just from getting within the sphere of his breath. I swear to God. And he had a scandalous game the same day. Thank God. He was a former county hurler too, so I was only delighted to get the pound of beer off him. But yeah, it does happen. And obviously it sounds like we're trivializing it the whole lot. There are situations where it's a bit of crack, but like there are situations where it's completely not right too.
Johnny Pilkington won a Fitzgibbon Cup one time and he'd been on the Raz, I think, at a wedding the night before, and he came back and played for UCD the next day. And now the story has absolutely reached mythological standing at this stage that he was doing X, Y, and Z now, and he said that's not true, but he did have a fair feed of pints that night before going to bed.
Joe LK20, what about performance enhancement insurance? No drug testing in GAA, hilarious. Well, there is, but there's not that much, and certainly not at club level. But anyway, on that point, we'll jump on to the Kilkenny Championship. Ballyhale Shamrocks look like they're starting to hit gear, and this is without the two Mullins. Darren and Adrian aren't available at the moment. Adrian has a broken hand.
Darren's back. I don't think Paddy is back.
Oh, sorry, apologies. But they beat Bennett's Bridge 27 points to 15. And the teams were level at half-time. It was 13 points to 110. So obviously Bennett's Bridge only scored 5 in the second half versus 14 points. Not ideal for them. TJ Reid scored 7. Owen Cody was lively. Joe Cudahy, again, he was lively. Looking for a 19th county title. But they're defending Kilkenny, Leinster and All-Ireland champions. And they just know how to win games. And that's seen again here.
Yeah, and they're obviously defending Kilkenny, Leinster and All-Ireland champions by 2 as well. They'll be going for 3 in a row in all of them. And I think it's 4 in a row of Kilkenny county titles, I think, at this stage. Obviously didn't get to go on and represent Kilkenny and Leinster and in the All-Ireland stages last year. But they definitely seem like they're kind of coming to the boil when they really need to. Adrian Mullen is out. I believe he has a broken hand and potentially has sepsis or some sort of an infection in his hand. So he could be under pressure for their semi-final against the Village, which is obviously a repeat of last year's epic semi-final. So that's going to be a really, really interesting game. But like just chatting to people at the game, it's just the amount of variety of scores and different lads that the Shamrocks have that can pop up. Like Owen Cody, who I think is just he's turned into a monster, I think, now, and could be so dangerous at county level over the next, probably the guts of a 10 years. Joey Cudahy's really made a name for himself in this year's championship. That's not to mention Colin Fennelly, Brian Cody, Ronan Corcoran. Like they've so many different guys that can chip in on a given day. It's such a star-studded squad, and that's not to mention I think Joey Holden was very good again yesterday, and Dean Mason's as good a club goalie as there is.
Yeah, Dara Corcoran's a county player. Yeah. Richie Reid, I think I saw Shamrocks or someone in Shamrocks tweeting that he was man of the match. These are all very good players.
Yeah, Richie Reid is an interesting one as well because he was man of the match essentially as Ballyhale sweeper throughout the game. And they didn't, by design, play a sweeper, but by all accounts, Bennett's Bridge played a sweeper. I think Nicky Clear was sweeper. I think a lot of that must have come back to the fears of that last quarter where Ballyhale scored 6 goals in their league clash. Because the Bridge didn't set up the same way as they did in that league final. And I think from any readings of the game of people that I was chatting to, it just seemed to really play to Ballyhale, into Ballyhale's hands. And a lot of people saying that Liam Blanchfield was a bit wasted out at wing forward and that he should have been inside in his best place in full forward.
He scored 4 from wing forward the previous day. So, I mean, you can't have it both ways, can you?
Yeah, the only thing is it's hard enough. Like, he's not the most natural scorer from out the pitch. So if there's a sweeper in close around him as well, a half forward, like is he gonna kill someone like Ballyhale with half forward? Whereas, and I take into account that I've just said that there's going to be a sweeper in front of him if he plays full forward as well. But if he's able to get ball and run at Joey Holden or run at whoever and get a couple of goals, that could be the winning. I think he's more likely to win you a game at full forward than wing forward. That's the way I'd put it to you.
Yeah, TJ Reid scored 6 points, 2 of those from play. Owen Cody, you mentioned him being a monster, 6 points from play, not to be sniffed at. Joey Cudahy, I think he'd scored a goal the previous day out. He scored 4 points here. Colin Fennelly, Brian Cody and Ronan Corcoran all with 3 each. I think when a lad scores 3 points, that really tells you that they have impacted the game. So having a few lads putting up that is interesting as well. And I hear talk that TJ Reid is very good at influencing the ref at sort of half reffing the game as a player. And you hear this about Kilkenny players over the years. Obviously, Joe Canning mentioned Henry Shefton in 2012. But I don't know, did you see the Niall Quinn interview on Virgin there? Was over the last couple of weeks. He told a great story about Roy Keane. Like, Niall Quinn is great value to listen to him talk. Obviously, a former minor hurler with Dublin. But he was just talking about Roy Keane and that they played him Monday when he was with, I'm pretty sure he was with Man City, Quinn. And Roy was still in his early 20s, but he was with Man United. And some cross went into the back post. Cantona went up and he thought that a foul was given against Cantona. And the referee, the whistle went, and the referee just started getting abused by Keane. What the hell are you doing? And all this kind of stuff. And the referee turned around and said, "It's a penalty for you, Roy, for your team." And Keane looks at him and goes, "Yeah, too right it is," or whatever. But he said even at that stage, the referees were, it was the fear of God put into them by Roy Keane. What a way to be able to impact the game. I'm not saying TJ Reid is doing it to that level or anything like that at all. But even like as a referee, wouldn't you be slightly deferring to some of these class players? You don't want to get on the wrong side of a class player, of a generational type player within your own county, do you?
No, definitely not. And at the end of the day, a lot of the referees refereeing these games, they're Kilkenny supporters. You know, they've been following TJ Reid or Colin Fenney or whoever it is for years and hoping for them to get Kilkenny over the line in big games. And like, if they're hurling supporters, which I'm sure they are, they would look up to those players in particular. So it can be a bit tricky. Like, remember the referee that refereed Portugal and Ireland, and he basically in awe of Ronaldo with the top off and going to give him the yellow card and nearly smiling at him. Do you know, the fact that he probably thinks, this is an honour to be on the same pitch as like one of the greatest footballers of all time. And some of the greatest players of all time in GAA have definitely used their power. Like, I no problem saying that, like, at club level in Offaly, Brian Wheelaton refereed games for years. He was like the Millennium Man, this almost like, you know, massive figure within the county, and people he'd probably given a lot of the people that referee in the matches some of their greatest days ever as Offaly people. And I remember one county final in particular where, like, it was audible to hear him calling freeze on the pitch and getting those calls in his favour. And the same would have been said, and Joe Canning kind of mentioned it about Henry Shefflin, and that would have been mentioned at club level in Kilkenny in particular. And there's probably some more good examples. It's like, are you telling me that Christy Ring didn't probably referee games when he was playing? You know, like, the referees probably were somewhat in awe of him. Now, I will say this. When people make you aware of it as a referee, it can flip the other way completely. And like, remember when there was this like edict almost put out to stop DJ running more than 4 steps with the ball, like, and he was blowing up. I distinctly remember Barry Kelly blowing him up several times. And it can work the other way when you know the way you're in a group of friends as well, and when you get that much sneering about an opinion that you have, it can almost flip the other way, and you're almost like, I'm going to prove these guys wrong, and no way. And the referees can go the other way. And to be honest, in my opinion, that did happen to some extent with Brian Whelan, with some referees in Offaly, and it happened. It usually comes when they're just at the end of their day, and maybe it happened with Shefflin in Ballyhale as well. But it is an interesting one. The stature of these players. What do you do a lot when you have power? People tend to abuse their power somewhat. That's just the nature of, it's human nature, really, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Mullinahone against Borrisley on Friday, Owen Kelly or Brendan Maher, who's going to get more frees? Who's going to be able to influence? Money mess there. People know I'm being tongue-in-cheek there. Joe Butler says, the difference at this stage of the championship with Ballyhale is that they have tidied up their defence. Richie Reid is a pain in his hand from mopping up and clearing ball. And I wonder now, it's going to be James Stephens in the semi-final for Ballyhale, isn't it?
That's correct,
so
yeah.
Would you, just in terms of having an iconic player on the field, a former hurler of the year, you'd nearly be tempted to start Owen Larkin, who came on, just to see if he can influence just as much as at the other end.
Yeah, I think he came in near the end of the game yesterday, and I think 3 balls went in near him, and I think he won the 3 balls. He's 37 now. He was obviously coaching with Wicklow earlier on the year, and he was over Ballinkillen in Carlow. And once those commitments kind of finished up, he's thrown himself back into the mix with the village again, and he's obviously been very effective. And you know, with those guys, if he came on for 5 minutes the last day, he'd come on for 10 minutes this day, and he could be 15 or 20 the next day. I don't probably envisage him starting, but if the game is in the melting pot, he'd be a great man to be thrown in. He didn't feature at all last year for the village, to my recollection. And you have to remember, James Stephens should have beaten Ballyhale last year. They were the better team when they met in the semi-final. They did everything bar win the game. And this will be the 3rd year in a row they've met. County final in 19, semi-final last year, and another semi-final again this year.
And did Conor Brown make his comeback? We're not 100% sure.
I'm not 100% sure on that, to be honest with you, but I know that Cian Kenny was absolutely unbelievable from all reports that I'm hearing. He'd be a kind of a lefty kind of like Cian Lynch in that same sort of style. I think he hit 5 from play. Supposed to have gotten this crazy kind of over-the-shoulder effort at the end of the game. And he's obviously someone who's been around the Kilkenny squad and been involved with the 20s, but probably someone who's getting closer to making that step up. And Conor Brown did play, so that's a big one. As long as he got through that game unscathed, he'd be a massive one to play against
for the last 15 minutes.
Yeah, they're going to need everybody. I believe they needed nearly everything to win the game yesterday. Shane Donoghue took a chance, the cornerback, on a puck out, and he just stayed going from a long puck out. You know, you'll often see like Donal O'Donovan in 13 just taking a chance bombing up the wing, and he ended up putting it in the back of the net, which is unbelievable. I think the referee, not that he blew, but everybody thought he was going to blow, and the play almost stopped. And then O'Donoghue turned and put the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah, I'd say the Borough will be fairly annoyed that they didn't, you know, like there's players running through and they didn't just pull down the runner. I mean, cynical and all as it is, you don't necessarily want to encourage that sort of play. But, you know, when you're out in the fields, you know as well as I do, there are times where you're going to row or bring them down, isn't there? And I mean, obviously we know that the penalty decision isn't the same at club level as it is at intercounty level. So I think we're going to see lots of lads being dragged down before the year is out. I wonder will it force a change actually in terms of the rule at club level, but we'll see. Let's see. I think also the referee allowed the village to re-hit a free that they had missed. I think Killian Buckley had been waving his hurley, and you know obviously it's in the rules, but obviously that was pretty costly because it's not always pulled back. Tom Kenny, Ollie Walsh, Chris Kavanagh, they were all missing. I think Padraig Moylan, he's a Kilkenny under-20 midfielder, they were all out, so very disappointing for them. And just to run through some of the village scores, Cian Kenny, he scored 6, including 1 free. Owen Guilfoyle scored 5 frees. Tygo Dwyer and Shane Donoghue with a point each. Matty Root was very good. He scored 3. Niall Brazel and Luke Scanlon also got a point. Elf Akidor 09 says Owen Larkin is some man to have to be able to bring on, especially at this time of year. So Loughlin Gales, they beat Mullinavat by 2-19 to 19 points. Early goals from Paddy Deegan, who's playing on the inside line, and Mark Bergen gave Gales the upper hand there. Hugh Lawler's going well, and then also the other semi-final, Tullaroan beat Clara after extra time, 129 to 219. And a couple of years after winning intermediate, and I all remember that celebration from Tommy Walsh when they won that in the interview, which is on our game today and exploded at the time. He's back. He's into a county senior semi-final at 38 and scored a goal along the way.
It's savage, isn't it? Really, yeah. They were very unlucky. We kind of talked about it last year. They ended up with some awful. They got an awful draw. The couple of games that they play. They played Ballyhale and should have beaten them in the first game, and a couple of other tough games. Yeah, ended up in a relegation semi-final. Obviously, got out of that kind of quagmire without getting into a final or anything like that. But they've gone really well this year. And we talked about this was a glorious kind of chance for them, particularly with Lester Ryan carrying a hamstring injury into the game, and it may have taken them extra time, but it's a huge result for them. And as someone said to me yesterday, like they've a great chance of getting to the semi-final as long as they don't overthink it. A lot of people would say that maybe they overthought being in intermediate finals for many years, and that's why it took them so long to get over the line. But Tommy's still going strong. Pádraig Walsh was superb again yesterday. Martin Walsh was brilliant on the wing. Shane was very good up front. You obviously have Tommy Walsh in the full back line then as well, and Mossy Keown in the forward line. Like that's a fair 5 or 6 players now when you put down there like that as well. And I believe, I can't think of his name offhand, but they have a brilliant minor who would, I can't think of his name offhand, someone said it to me last night, who would definitely walk onto their senior team next year. So they have a couple coming as well. But these sort of opportunities don't come around every year. And obviously, O'Loughlin Gales have a massive pedigree, but they maybe weren't going that well earlier, motoring an awful lot better now. But Tullaroan have a chance to get into a county final without playing the Village or without playing Ballyhale. And that is a massive chance, you have to say.
Yeah, Nisha adds in here, Pádraig Walsh took over in extra time. He was phenomenal. Tommy's goal was crucial. Martin and Shane Walsh, all very good too. And Walton, when moved into the forwards, was absolutely brilliant. So those are very tasty semi-finals in Kilkenny. It's absolutely brilliant championship. So we're looking forward to seeing how the semi-finals go there. And obviously some nice matchups we're going to see within the game between Gales and Tullaroan. And obviously, sure, look, you don't really need to hype up Shamrocks against the Village too much. That's going to be a classic game also. Henry Shefflin's Thomastown, they also won the league final at the weekend.
Yeah, that's obviously an early trophy for them. By all talk, it's good. Glenmore and Thomastown, probably the two kind of big fish at intermediate level. But obviously when Henry's involved, there's going to be an awful lot of talk around it. You'd have to say probably anything other than a county title would be a failure, realistically. And they've been very, very close in recent years as well. Obviously,
you're looking to load up the pressure on Henry there.
And there's already enough pressure on him. Like that's all anybody is going to expect is a title for them. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out over the next few weeks.
Yeah, the Galway Championship had some serious drama in it over the weekend, but we'll run through the different groups anyway. Turlockmore, they won against Haskell Fahina, so they're through. Lots of injuries, so title might be beyond them. They got to the final last year, losing to Thomas's. Crockwell, who were managed by Brian Hanley and Niall Healy's part of that, they topped the group, beating Castlegar, so that's it's Fergal Lynch's Castlegar and Saoirse Bulfin's involved as well. Second year in a row that they're knocked out in the group stages. Senior A Group 2, Thomas's beat Capitagle, but both advanced to the knockouts. Thomas's were behind at half time, sorted out in the second half. James Regan and David Burke were influential, and James Skehill pulled off 3 point-blank saves. Liam Mellows got relegated, and that could be the end for Louis Mulqueen there. They drew with Clymer Daly the last day, which meant Clymer Daly were safe. And then also Group 3. I'm going to just bring this up on the screen. Do you want to just give some of the background to Group 3, and I'll just bring this up? Sarsfields were in a great spot now before this weekend.
Yeah, they were in a great spot. I think they had to basically just lose by less than 5 points, and they were 6 down going into injury time against Loughrea, and they had a penalty, and they needed a goal, obviously, which would have seen them lose the game by 3 and go through, and this is what happened. And it's literally the last puck of the game. It doesn't get higher drama, and fair play to whoever took this video from behind the goals, because it perfectly captures the drama.
He did well.
He did, and the fact that the keeper got up with the one hand, looking like that's hero stat. That is hero stat.
Look at the kids even jumping in the grass here at the end. Look at that celebration. Absolutely lovely. That's great stuff. Hard to beat. I'd say that keeper was being toasted everywhere after the game there. Fair play to him. So that's Sarsfield's gone out. Tommy Larkin's topped the group after hammering Oran Marie. Jason Flynn, David Connors from the Tuam Herald, give him a follow on Twitter there. He was giving me some of the background to the Galway Championship, and he was saying Jason Flynn had 23 shots at the post in the game, scored 8 points, 8 from frees. Scored 14 points, 8 from frees, 4 frees and 2 sidelines, 8 wides. I mean, what a contribution to the game. Both good, a lot of good, and a little bit of bad there too.
Fair to say he was shooting on sight, I'd say.
I think so, yeah. Is he trusting the players around him? No, to be fair, like, even to get yourself in a position to have 23 shots in a game, it's some goal.
Savage, yeah. Like he's their star man. They are probably getting him the ball realistically as well. It's probably get the ball to Jo, as they call him, and get him to take the shots. 8 of them might have went wide, but there was plenty that went over.
Yeah, and Portumna are true. So this is kind of one of the strange ones. The Portumna, didn't they get hammered in their first game by Ballindereen, and then they had a draw, and then narrowly beat Baha, and they're through to the quarterfinals, whereas Sarsfields are gone.
Yeah, it's mad. And obviously Mellows, who contested finals and won a final in recent years, are relegated now as well. And obviously, as Joe Canning said earlier on the year, the Galway structures nearly favours the teams in Senior B, which just seems a bit strange. Like, and I suppose this is somewhat like that proposal B that's going to be going through for the football championship. That like if you did a ranking system, you know, you had teams ranked 1 to 16 within Galway. It does seem a bit strange that, say, teams 6, 7, and 8 would not be in the quarterfinals, and teams ranked, 10, 11, and 12 could be in the quarterfinals. It does seem a bit askew. So it'd have to be some questioning of the structures within Galway.
Yeah, to be fair, like it does make you do wonder at times, even with like the Senior B proposal in Gaelic football, that teams from so the way that works out, played on the current league basis, with the top 5 in Division 1 and Division 2 winners qualifying for All-Ireland quarterfinals. For the remaining 2 places in the last 8, the Division 3 and 4 table toppers face the 2nd and 3rd place teams in Division 2 and preliminary quarterfinals. It does mean that like the 25th ranked team in the championship, which would be the Division 4 table toppers there, just in terms of league structure, 8 in each, that they would be going through or in a chance for the knockout stages, whereas teams number 6, 7, and 8 in the country are not in that shake-up. And I get you're trying to give everyone an opportunity, but in some ways you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot in terms of having like all the best teams playing each other at the latter end of the championship.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. They're trying to keep everybody involved, but you're also like Tyrone, like the All-Ireland champions for this year, could easily end up outside the top 6, even though they are a top 2 or 3 side. You know what I mean? So it's a kind of a tricky one. You're not going to please everyone. There's obviously going to be more games. People are going to get more competitive games. But particularly at the top end, you wouldn't be sure how fair it is on the teams that finish 6, 7 and 8.
Yeah. So just the preliminary quarter-final lineup for next weekend in Galway. The teams that we know are through already are St. Thomas's, Tommy Larkins and Crockwell. Capitagle were the second-place team in Senior A, drawn from a hat to join them in the quarter-finals. But the preliminary quarter-finals are going to be Loughrea against Cairnbridge, Gurt against Portumna, Kilconneran against Porrick Pierces, and Turlockmore against Kilnadima Leitrim. So
just a quick one on that, Shane. There was a little birdie told me that the draws are generally done in collaboration with Galway Bay FM, but that this weekend they weren't, which would be a bit of an outlier with regards to how they've done their draws. So I don't know if it was a case where Galway officials didn't want to be quizzed on the current senior manager position or anything like that. That's just something I heard over the weekend and I thought it was unusual. The draws are usually done in association with Galway Bay FM, so maybe they want to lie low until they have something in place.
Yeah. So the Offaly Championship, which of course you were involved
Speaking of lying low.
yeah. So Rhinos came from behind to beat Kilcormac by 9. Shinrone beat Burr by 7. Coolderry annihilated Drumcullen. Ballinamere beat Sheer Kieran, and Belmont defeated Kinnity by 2 there. So how's the championship shaping up? Who's looking like the most likely this year at the moment?
Well, it's a strange kind of a setup. Well, it sounds strange on paper, but I think it makes sense. So there's 2 groups of 5, but you don't play the teams in your group. So you play the 5 teams in the other group. So what that means is, it means there's no idle weekend. So it means there's always 5 games on every weekend. Whereas if you only played the teams in your group, there would be 1 team idle every weekend. So there's 5 games every weekend. The results are merged into one league table. So you're going to have, and it's the top 4 that qualify straight through to the semi-finals. 5, 6, 7 and 8 are finished for the year, and 9 and 10 play off in the relegation final to see who stays up and who goes down. I thought it was a bit convoluted, but I have to say the interest going into the last round is absolutely crazy. We're on 4 points. Shinrone are on 4. Belmont are on 4. Kinnity are on 4. Ballinamere are on 4. And basically, I think we all have a chance of going through. Now, we used to play Rhinos in the last game based on the Shinrone game at the weekend, and Rhinos beating Kilcormac in the repeated county final. You'd say Rhinos would have to be outstanding favourites going into that. Shinrone still have a chance of qualifying. Belmont still have a chance. Kinnity still have a chance. And Ballinamere still have a chance. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. All the games will be played at the same time. So you'd want like a Sky Sports screen in front of you with updated results, or the What's the Score app, in fairness, is top class for it. And you can see exactly what's going on in different venues at different times. But it'd be nearly impossible to predict the top. You can predict the top 3, I'd say. But you couldn't to predict the 4 team. There's so many variables going into the last game.
Was there any seeding to decide those 2 groups of 5?
Yeah, so the last year's county finalists, Rhinos and Kilcormac, were in opposite groups. Last year's county semi-finalists, which were Burr and Belmont, were in opposite groups. And then likewise 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. So I think it's a pretty fair championship, I have to say. It used to be a group of 8 and you played 7 group games, but it was too long for a dual county, so they've split it this way, and I think it makes sense, to be honest with you. There's nobody giving out. I'll put it to you this way, that potentially someone could get on 6 points or 8 points without having to play a load of hard games. It's quite an even championship.
Yeah, and just a reminder, there's plenty of nice comments coming in about the show, so we appreciate that. Also a reminder, please do subscribe to the show. It costs absolutely nothing. In the bottom right-hand corner where Michael Verney is pointing there, if you're watching on YouTube, and follow all the social channels too. We'd really appreciate that. Also, if you do want the audio podcast, which is obviously very handy if you're going for a run or a walk and you don't want to have YouTube open, go to patreon.com/OurGame. You can get all the audio podcasts there. The Laois Championship is one we haven't talked about all that much coming up to this stage, but there was a couple of quarterfinals over the weekend. Camross, or as I heard a Laois local a few times recently, who'd be in my extended friend group, refer to him as Cumross. Cumross. Is this how people pronounce it down in Laois? I see it and I say Camross.
I've heard that before now, in fairness. I also said to you off air that was at a Laois Offaly football championship game in 2003, and I also heard Laois supporters shouting for West Laois. So you could hear anything when you get parochial like that. You could hear anything being pronounced anyway, and all sorts of strange things.
So Cumross beat Castletown 124 to 12 points. Zane Keenan scored 10 points. 8 of those were from place balls. David Mortimer scored 3. Owen Gahan scored a goal there. On the other side for Castletown, Conor Phelan scored 3, and so did Martin Phelan. Ryan Mullaney got a couple of points. The other semi-final saw Rathdowney Earl beat Rosenallis 214 to 116, so just by the minimum there. And it was actually the first ever senior championship match between the two teams, but it was marred by an injury to Mark Kavanagh, who's had a lot of problems with injury in the last year or two. He had 1-2 to his name, and then in the 38th minute, he went down with an injury too. That is the last thing that both Laois manager Seamus Cheddar Plunkett and the people of Rathdowney Earl would have wanted to hear.
Yeah, Mark Kavanagh didn't play for Laois at all this year, to the best of my recollection. And he's had a lot of knee injuries in recent years, so you'd hope that's not too serious, even though it probably doesn't look great. I think there's football this weekend in Laois, so they've probably 2 weeks to get him right, but it's definitely not ideal. Shane Keegan is actually the manager at Downey Errol, who was obviously managing Dundalk Football Club not too long ago. So I think he's got a UEFA Pro license badge, but he's from Rathdowney, and by all accounts, he's a hurling man. Would have been a hurling man first and foremost. I remember chatting Ross King before, and he said that Shane was one of like 5 people up in Antrim at some league game they played years ago. So he's definitely hurling through and through, but it's going to be 2 really interesting semi-finals. Cockballacalla are flying it. They've taken that 2020 form, which they carried into to win the county final, the delayed county final, into this year. They're going up against Rathdowney, and then you have Boris Kilcotton and Camross on the other side. So things really, really heating up there.
Yeah, and also, what was I going to add in there? Something else to add in there, but I'm after. I zoned out for a second there now, so I'm after catching myself.
I'm sure it was highly intellectual.
No, do you know what? It was actually about Shane Keegan, that a couple of years ago, 2019 Tipperary quarter-final being played in Holy Cross. He was just at nothing that day, so he decided to drive from Laois down to Holy Cross just to watch Bursley against Drum in the county quarter-final. So it just shows his interest in hurling is obviously very, very big there, and he's massively into it. Just a final thing before we finish out. This isn't hurling chat, but Footballer of the Year chat. Between Conor Myler, Lee Keegan, and Kieran McGeary, you've got 3 unbelievable footballers there. I'd be looking at Conor Myler to win the Footballer of the Year, I have to say, even though Lee Keegan, he was brilliant and so defiant in that All-Ireland final. He was obviously brilliant against Dublin too. But for me, I just think Conor Myler just did such unbelievable jobs on the biggest days.
When was the last time we had a hurler or footballer of the year debate where you cannot confidently call any of the 3? You really can't. Like, would it? I think it was Edmund McGreal tweeted last week that he said he thinks that Lee Keegan will win the Footballer of the Year the more he thinks about it. And I kind of thinking, geez, the more I think about it, even though they were comprehensively nearly beaten in the final, just his defiance will definitely resonate with an awful lot of people, and he's so revered and loved by other footballers even around the country. I think he's an outstanding shout. Conor Myler kind of did the Lee Keegan job for Tyrone, didn't he, by picking up one of the opposition's most kind of deadliest players and putting them on the back foot. And then obviously Kieran McGeary was brilliant, particularly in the semi-final. But I don't know what way you do the split. Like I don't know who I'd actually probably. Some of it, I tell you what, interestingly enough, will come into the mix. Is some of Conor Myler's interviews that he's done, I think, after the All-Ireland final will actually come into the mix and will play in his favour. His remarkable honesty about some mental health issues and self-doubt and overthinking things and all that. He really lifted the lid on himself, and I do think that will play to his favour, and I'm sure that was not on his agenda, but I think it probably will, maybe, and might just swing it. But geez, I'd be very hard pressed to confidently call either of the 3, to be honest.
Well, put it this way: in the All-Ireland semi-final, he shut down Paddy Clifford for the vast majority of the game and put him going in the other direction a fair bit. In the All-Ireland final against Paddy Durkin, one of the most important players from Mayo, he certainly won that battle as far as I'm concerned. And he was very strong throughout all the Ulster games as well. Kieran McGeary is really, really good. If I was to try and pick holes, was it something like 4 misses in the semi-final against Kerry? albeit one of those shots dropped short and ended up being a goal for Conor McKenna after, what's his name, Jack Barry had tried to flick it clear. But I don't know, I think I interviewed Conor Myler a couple of years ago, and maybe I just kind of liked him a little bit after the interview. Now, I've interviewed Lee Keegan too, he's sound out. I haven't interviewed Kieran McGeary, so I'm just leaning towards Conor Myler. A couple of lads commenting here, a couple of people. EH, love the show, lads, keep it up. Lee Keegan, so my beloved Mayo can have some sort of happiness. Lee Keegan, 32 years of age, time for people to select a player that is not from the winning county. And Lee Keegan, for me, says Patrick Hickey. Of course, he did win it in 2016, so it's not unheard of to have somebody from a county that didn't win it lift that award.
No, definitely not. It is the exception rather than the rule. That was the same year Austin Gleeson won it when Waterford were beaten in a semi-final. So yeah, like Lee Keegan is loved, and I think what I really, really like about him is how he looked under not his career looked under pressure, but when Con skinned him for the 2 goals in the semi-final in 19, there was the inclination that his best days maybe have been behind him, and this year definitely suggested otherwise anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it for the show, is it? We've nearly all said.
All said, yeah. God only knows what will happen between now and Thursday. The hurling gods seem to have smiled on us in recent weeks, so hopefully they'll continue to do so, and there'll be plenty of things happening over the next few days.
Yeah. Do we have a goat of the week? I think Paul Shields would have to be up there in terms of helping Dunloy to that county title.
Yeah, like you could probably give it to someone in one of the other games, but a county final, the GOAT deserves to be from a county final performance. So I think Paul Shields would do for me, particularly of that age. You always love to see lads over 30. Maybe that's why I'd have a soft spot for Lee Keegan with the Footballer of the Year as well. You just love to see lads in their 30s still doing it.
Yeah, true enough. And as I said already, please, if you wouldn't mind, just hit that subscribe button on the channel. We'd love to get it over 10,000. Makes all the difference in terms of trying to build that channel because it recommends it to other people. So that's it. That's the height of it. We'll see you again on Thursday. Thanks very much, Michael.
Cheers, Shane.